The morning sun cut through the California mist like a knife through silk. Master Chief Petty Officer Jack Dalton stood at the edge of the training range at Naval Base Coronado, watching 6 young sailors attempt to defuse a practice device buried in a simulated combat zone. His weathered hands, scarred from 3 decades of handling explosives, held a stopwatch. His gray eyes tracked every movement with the precision of a man who had seen what happened when precision failed. 54 years old, 2 weeks from mandatory retirement, 32 years of service. The numbers ran through his mind like a countdown timer he could not stop. The youngest sailor, a kid barely 23, reached for the obvious red wire. Jack's jaw tightened. He did not call out. Not yet. Training was about learning, and some lessons had to be earned through mistakes. But his finger hovered over the radio button, ready to abort if the kid went too far. The sailor hesitated. Good. Doubt was healthy in this line of work. Overconfidence killed more bomb techs than bad luck ever did. Jack remembered being that age. Fresh out of EOD school, convinced he was invincible, certain that his training made him untouchable. That was before Baghdad, before the IED that killed 7 Marines because he had trusted the obvious solution, before the nightmares that still woke him at 300 hours, drenched in sweat, hearing the screams. The sailor pulled his hand back from the red wire. He knelt closer, using a mirror to examine the underside of the device. Better. Much better. The kid was thinking now, not just following protocol like a robot. Petty Officer First Class Tommy Reeves stood beside Jack, clipboard in hand, logging the training times. 26 years old, eager as a hunting dog, Tommy represented everything Jack used to be. The younger man lived and breathed explosive ordnance disposal. No wife, no kids, nothing but the Navy and the mission. Jack recognized that fire because he had carried it himself for 3 decades. He knew where that fire led. To excellence, yes. To respect and medals and lives saved, absolutely. But also to loneliness. To missed birthdays and empty beds and the kind of regrets that aged a man faster than any combat zone. Tommy glanced at him. His voice was quiet, respectful. The way junior enlisted spoke to senior chiefs who had earned their rank in blood and sweat rather than peacetime desk assignments. Are you really retiring, Master Chief, in 2 weeks? Just like that? Jack did not take his eyes off the training range. The sailor was now tracing wires with a wooden probe, careful not to complete any circuits. Smart, very smart. Just like that, he said. 32 years is long enough. Time to let you young guys take over. But sir, you are the best we have. Everyone knows it. Half the EOD community learned from you or learned from someone you trained. You wrote 3 chapters in the current manual. You have more successful defusals than anyone in naval special warfare. Jack finally looked at Tommy. The younger man's face showed genuine distress, as if Jack's retirement was a personal betrayal rather than a bureaucratic inevitability. That is exactly why I need to go, son. Because if I stay too long, you all start thinking I am immortal. Start thinking that because old Jack Dalton survived this long, the job must be safe. It is not safe. It will never be safe. And the day you forget that is the day you get yourself alone. The words came out harsher than he intended. Tommy flinched slightly, then nodded, understanding in his eyes. Good kid. He would make a fine EOD tech if he lived long enough to learn the difference between bravery and stupidity. On the range, the sailor finally disconnected the power source. The practice device went inert. The timer stopped at 47 seconds remaining. Not bad, not great, but not bad. The kid would live to learn more, which was the whole point of training. Jack clicked the stopwatch. 12 minutes, 18 seconds. Acceptable for a training scenario. In real combat, with adrenaline and fear and the knowledge that a single wrong move meant death, that time would double, maybe triple. That was the part they could not train for, the part that came only from experience and luck, and something deeper that Jack had never quite found the words to explain. He keyed his radio. Well done, Seaman Mitchell. You hesitated at the right moment. That hesitation saved your life. Remember that feeling. Trust it. In the field, your instincts will talk to you. Listen to them. The sailor stood up, relief visible even from 50 yards away. He waved acknowledgement. Jack waved back. 32 years of sending young men into danger, and it never got easier. Every time he watched a sailor approach a device, he saw the faces of the ones who had not walked away. 7 in Baghdad, 3 in Afghanistan, 1 in the Philippines. 2 during training accidents that should never have happened. 11 men, their names were carved into his memory, deeper than any tattoo, more permanent than any medal. He carried them with him every day, every hour. That weight never lightened. He had simply learned to bear it. Tommy was watching him with that expression young sailors got when they were building up courage to ask something personal. Jack had seen it 1,000 times. Usually it was about women or money or whether to re-enlist. But Tommy's expression suggested something deeper. Master Chief, can I ask you something personal? Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He held up one finger to Tommy, pulled out the phone. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with a Washington area code. He almost declined the call. Almost. But 32 years of service had trained him that certain phone calls, especially from certain area codes, were not optional. He answered. Dalton. The voice on the other end was familiar. Colonel James Harrison, his former commanding officer, now serving as an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Harrison was 62, a warrior from the old school, a man who had led from the front and earned every one of his scars. When Harrison called, it was never for small talk. Jack, I need you to listen carefully. Do not react. Do not ask questions yet. Just listen. Something in Harrison's tone made Jack's spine straighten. He turned away from Tommy, walking a few steps for privacy. His free hand automatically moved to his hip, where his service weapon would be if he were on deployment. Old habits. I am listening, sir. Suspicious device was found at the Port of Los Angeles 40 minutes ago. Routine cargo inspection. Container from Rotterdam, false documentation. LAPD bomb squad called us in because the device looks military grade. Jack, I sent them photos. I need you to look at them right now. I am texting you a secure link. The phone buzzed. Jack opened the message, tapped the link. 3 high-resolution images loaded. His blood went cold. The device sat in a shipping container, nestled among packing materials like a malignant tumor. 40 pounds of Semtex explosive, molded around a central mechanism. But it was not the explosive that froze Jack's heart. It was the timer. Mechanical, not digital. Brass gears visible through a clear casing, intricate as a Swiss watch, beautiful in its precision. And etched into the brass, Cyrillic letters that Jack had not seen in 35 years, but recognized instantly. His hand tightened on the phone. The world seemed to tilt slightly, as if gravity had shifted. Colonel, where did you say this container originated? Rotterdam, but the manifests are fake, could have come from anywhere in Europe. Why, do you recognize it? Jack's mouth was dry. He was seeing another device, in another city, on another continent. Berlin, 1989. He had been 23 years old, a junior EOD tech supporting CIA operations during the final days of the Cold War. The device had been planted at a checkpoint near the Brandenburg Gate, timed to detonate during a diplomatic convoy. Jack had been the one to defuse it, working by flashlight in the freezing rain, while East German guards watched from towers and his hands shook from cold and fear. He had succeeded. Barely. And afterward, when intelligence analyzed the device, they had found a signature, a maker's mark, Cyrillic letters etched into the mechanism. The same letters he was looking at now. Sir, I need transport to Los Angeles immediately, and I need authorization to take command of the scene. You recognize the device? I recognize the maker. His name is Alexander Volkov, Soviet GRU, Special Operations Bomb Maker. We thought he was dead. Harrison was quiet for 3 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man who understood exactly what Jack was saying. Helicopter is spinning up now. You will be wheels up in 8 minutes. Jack, if Volkov is alive and operating on U.S. soil, this is not just a bomb threat. This is an act of war. Jack was already moving toward the parking area, gesturing for Tommy to follow. His mind was racing through scenarios, probabilities, tactics. Volkov had been the best, the absolute best. Soviet military intelligence had used him for high-value targets, political assassinations disguised as accidents, devices so sophisticated that even after defusal, Western intelligence could barely understand how they worked. He was an artist who worked in explosives, a craftsman who took pride in his creations. His bombs were not meant to be simple tools of destruction. They were meant to be challenges, puzzles that would kill the unwary and test the skilled. And if Volkov was back, if he had surfaced after 3 decades of silence, there would be a reason. Men like Volkov did not act without purpose. This was not about money. This was about legacy, about making a final statement that would be studied and remembered long after he was gone. Tommy was jogging to keep up, confusion on his face. "Master Chief, what is happening?" Jack reached his truck, opened the door, grabbed his go bag from behind the seat. The bag was always packed, always ready. Spare uniform, toiletries, technical equipment, field manuals, a waterproof notebook filled with sketches and notes from 3 decades of studying explosive devices. The bag smelled like gun oil and old canvas and memories. He turned to Tommy. "Listen carefully. You are in charge of training until I get back. Run the next 2 groups through the same scenarios. Focus on recognizing false solutions. Teach them that the obvious answer is usually a trap. Make them think. Make them doubt. Doubt keeps you alive." "Sir, where are you going?" "Los Angeles. Credible threat. I cannot say more." Tommy's eyes widened. "You are being activated? But you retire in 2 weeks." Jack swung into his truck, started the engine. He looked at Tommy through the open window. The younger man's face showed something between concern and excitement. The way young warriors looked when they smelled action, but were not yet experienced enough to fear it. 2 weeks is a long time in our business, son. A lot can happen in 2 weeks. He drove toward the helipad, the California sun now fully risen, burning away the morning mist. Through his rearview mirror, he watched Tommy standing in the parking lot, still holding the clipboard, looking lost. Jack felt a pang of something like guilt, or maybe regret. The kid would be fine. The training program would continue. Life moved on with or without Jack Dalton. But as he drove, his mind was not on Tommy or training or retirement. His mind was on a cold night in Berlin, a young Soviet officer watching from across the checkpoint, and a bomb that should have killed a dozen people but did not because a 23-year-old American EOD tech got lucky. Had that Soviet officer been Volkov himself, watching his creation, studying the American who defeated it? Jack had always wondered. Intelligence had never confirmed Volkov's physical presence at any of his bombings. The man was a ghost, known only through his work. And now, 35 years later, the ghost had returned. The helicopter was waiting, rotors already spinning, the pilot making final checks. Jack climbed aboard, strapped in, put on the headset. The crew chief gave him a thumbs up. The helicopter lifted off, banking west toward Los Angeles, and Jack watched San Diego fall away beneath them. Somewhere down there, his house stood empty. The house he had bought with his wife Margaret 20 years ago, when they still believed they had time. The house where she died 3 years ago, wasted by cancer, holding his hand and forgiving him for all the deployments and missed anniversaries and times he chose the mission over her. He had sold most of her things, clothes to charity, furniture to neighbors, books to a used shop. But her photos remained. On the mantle, on the walls, on his nightstand, Margaret smiling on their wedding day, Margaret holding their newborn son, Margaret at Michael's commissioning ceremony, pride shining in her eyes even as the cancer hollowed her out from inside. The helicopter flew over the Pacific Ocean, sunlight dancing on the waves, and Jack thought about his son. Lieutenant Michael Dalton, 28 years old, an F-18 pilot stationed on the USS Ronald Reagan, currently somewhere in the Pacific conducting carrier operations. They had not spoken in 6 months. Michael had stopped calling after the funeral, stopped answering Jack's messages. The silence hurt worse than any wound Jack had taken in combat. Margaret had been the bridge between them. She translated Jack's stoic military mindset into words Michael could understand, explained to Michael why his father was always deployed, always on mission, always somewhere else when birthdays and graduations and baseball games happened. Without her, that bridge had collapsed, and Jack did not know how to rebuild it. He pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, scrolled to Michael's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he say? "Son, I might not make it to retirement after all. There is a bomb maker from the Cold War who apparently is not dead, and I am the only one who knows his work. If something happens, know that I love you, and I am sorry for all the times I was not there." He put the phone away without calling. That was not the way. If he died today, Michael would learn about it through official channels. That was how the military worked. Clean, efficient, professional. No messy emotions, no awkward conversations. Just a knock on the door and an officer in dress uniform with a folded flag and rehearsed condolences. The helicopter flew on. Jack closed his eyes, but he did not sleep. He was reviewing everything he knew about Volkov, everything he had learned from intelligence briefings 3 decades ago. Soviet military engineer, trained at the Frunze Military Academy, recruited by GRU for special operations. Brilliant, patient, meticulous. His devices were works of art, elegant in their complexity, designed to challenge the very best bomb disposal experts. He built psychological traps into his bombs, false solutions that would kill technicians who relied on standard procedures. He wanted his opponents to think, to struggle, to believe they could win, and then to die anyway. But he also had a tell. Jack had figured it out in Berlin, working by instinct more than knowledge. Volkov's devices always had 3 elements. The obvious threat, meant to draw attention and create time pressure. The false solution, meant to kill those who followed protocols. And the hidden vulnerability, meant to be exploited only by someone who truly understood how Volkov thought. In Berlin, Jack had ignored the timer, ignored the obvious wires, and instead froze the entire mechanism with liquid nitrogen, then manually disconnected the detonators. It had been improvisation born from desperation, not brilliant insight, but it had worked. And afterward, intelligence analysts had told him he was lucky, that Volkov's devices were designed to be unbeatable, that Jack should never have survived. But he had survived, and now, 35 years later, Volkov wanted a rematch. The helicopter began its descent toward Los Angeles. Jack could see the port below. Massive container ships lined up like toys, cranes moving with insect precision. Somewhere down there, a bomb waited, and with it, answers to questions Jack had carried for 3 decades. The helicopter landed on a cleared section of dock. Jack jumped out before the skids fully touched concrete, his go-bag over his shoulder, moving with the efficiency of a man who had made 1,000 tactical insertions. A police captain met him at the landing zone, flanked by 2 LAPD bomb squad officers in full EOD gear. The captain looked stressed, sweat staining his uniform despite the cool morning air. "Master Chief Dalton, Captain Rodriguez, LAPD. We have evacuated a 2-mile radius. Device is in container 774, Section B of the dock. Our bomb squad has eyes on it via robot, but we have not touched it. Orders from JSOC were to wait for you." Jack shook the captain's hand. The man had a firm grip, steady despite the stress. Good sign. Panic killed more people than bombs in situations like this. "Show me the live feed." They walked to a mobile command center, a converted RV filled with monitors and communication equipment. On the largest screen, a robot's camera showed the device in detail. Jack's heart rate increased slightly as he studied it. Yes, this was Volkov's work. No question. The mechanical timer, the Semtex molding, the precise wire placement, even the way the explosive was shaped, maximizing force while minimizing material, showed a craftsman's touch. But something was different. The timer showed 27 minutes remaining. In Berlin, the timer had shown hours. Why so little time here? Was Volkov rushing? Or was this device meant to be found, meant to draw a response, meant to serve some larger purpose? Jack turned to Captain Rodriguez. "Has anyone touched this container? Moved it? Scanned it with any equipment?" "Negative. We found it during routine inspection at 0600 hours. The second our tech recognized it as military grade, he backed off and called us. We called Federal called JSOC, and here we are." "Good. Very good. Your tech just saved lives by being cautious." Jack studied the screen. Tommy had arrived with him on the helicopter, and the young petty officer now stood beside him, eyes wide as he took in the device. Jack could see the younger man cataloging details, comparing what he saw to training scenarios, probably running through defusal procedures in his mind. "Master Chief, that timer, 27 minutes. That is not much time." Jack glanced at the clock on the wall. 24 minutes now. "No, it is not." "What is the plan, sir?" Jack was silent for 15 seconds, studying the device from every angle the robot camera could provide. The explosive was definitely Semtex, probably C4 variant, military grade, enough to level several containers and kill anyone within 100 yards. The timer was mechanical, beautiful in its complexity, gears turning with Swiss precision. But there were also secondary triggers. He could see the outlines, pressure sensor, mercury tilt switch, possibly more hidden beneath the packing materials. This was a test. Volkov was testing him, seeing if Jack remembered the lessons from Berlin, seeing if age had dulled his edge, seeing if the American who had once defeated him was still capable. The room waited. Captain Rodriguez, his bomb squad officers, Tommy, various federal agents and intelligence analysts. They all looked at Jack, waiting for the veteran to make the call that would determine whether people lived or died today. Jack had set down his go bag, unzipped it, began pulling out equipment. Wire cutters, mirrors, probes, a portable liquid nitrogen canister. Tools of his trade, some of them older than Tommy, all of them maintained with the kind of care that came from knowing your life depended on them. He looked at Tommy. You are going to stay here and monitor via robot camera. If something goes wrong, you need to survive to tell everyone what happened. Understood? Sir, I should go with you. 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of hands. Negative. This bomb maker does not build devices meant for teams. He builds them for individuals. 1 tech, 1 bomb, 1 outcome. That is his philosophy. If I bring you, he will have planned for that, and we will both die. Tommy opened his mouth to argue, saw Jack's expression, closed it again. He nodded. Jack turned to Captain Rodriguez. Evacuate everyone another half mile. If this goes wrong, the shrapnel will travel farther than 2 miles. And make sure your people know, if they hear an explosion, they do not come running to help. They hold position and call it in. No heroes. We clear? The captain nodded, already reaching for his radio. Jack picked up his gear, walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard Tommy's voice, quiet but urgent. Master Chief, sir? He stopped, looked back. The young petty officer's face showed something Jack recognized because he had felt it himself 3 decades ago. Fear mixed with faith. Fear that something would go wrong. Faith that the old veteran knew what he was doing. Bring her home, sir, please. Jack allowed himself a small, tired smile. I always do, son. He walked out into the Los Angeles morning, the sun now fully risen, the day warming. Around him, police were moving people back, expanding the evacuation zone, shouting orders. Jack walked against the flow, toward the container, toward the device, toward the challenge that Alexander Volkov had left for him. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, saw a message from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, then decided to check. The message contained no words, just an image. A photograph of a bomb, old and grainy, clearly from the 1980s. The device at Brandenburg Gate, the one Jack had defused in Berlin. And beneath the photo, a single line of text in English, the grammar slightly off in the way that marked a non-native speaker. Welcome back to the game, Jack Dalton. Let us see if you still remember how to play. Jack's jaw tightened. He deleted the message, pocketed the phone. So Volkov knew he was here, knew he had taken the bait. Good. That meant this was personal. Personal fights had rules, and rules could be exploited. He reached the container. The metal was hot from the sun, the interior dim. The device sat in the center exactly as the robot camera had shown. Jack knelt beside it, his knees protesting slightly. Age was a betrayal of the body, a slow theft of capabilities that had once seemed infinite. But age also brought experience, patience, understanding. He pulled out a small mirror, began examining the device from angles, careful not to touch anything, not to disturb any sensor that might be waiting for contact. The Semtex was molded professionally, shaped charges designed to direct the blast upward and outward. If this detonated, it would punch through the container roof like a shaped charge through armor, then spread in a killing radius that would shred anyone nearby. The timer read 18 minutes. Jack looked at the gears, the intricate mechanism that was counting down to detonation. In Berlin, he had frozen the device. Would that work again? Or had Volkov learned, adapted, built-in countermeasures? He examined the mercury tilt switch. It was positioned at an angle, slightly off from standard placement. Deliberate? Or just Volkov's signature style? If Jack tried to move the device, the mercury would flow, complete a circuit, trigger immediate detonation. But the angle was wrong, too steep. If the switch were functional as positioned, normal vibrations from the dock, from passing forklifts, from the container being moved during loading, would have triggered it already. So the tilt switch was a decoy, a false threat meant to keep him from moving the device, meant to trap him into working in this uncomfortable position, meant to consume time while the real threat ticked away. Jack checked the pressure sensor. It was attached to the container floor, measuring weight. Remove the device, reduce pressure, trigger detonation. Standard design. Except this sensor was analog, old technology, the kind that had been phased out in the 1990s because digital sensors were more reliable. Why would Volkov use inferior technology? Unless the technology was not inferior for his purposes. Analog sensors could not be jammed electronically, could not be hacked, could not be defeated by any of the modern countermeasures that bomb squads used. Volkov was old school, Cold War era, and he built devices that reflected that philosophy. Mechanical, analog, immune to electromagnetic warfare. Clever, very clever. 12 minutes. Jack pulled out his liquid nitrogen canister, began applying it to the timer mechanism. The metal contracted, frost spreading across the brass like ice flowers. The gears slowed, struggling against the sudden cold. This was the moment. Either the device would freeze and become inert, or it would detect the temperature change and detonate. Jack held his breath. The gears stopped. The timer froze at 11 minutes, 43 seconds. Jack released his breath slowly. Phase 1 complete. The timer was disabled. But that did not mean the bomb was safe. The pressure sensor was still active. The tilt switch, even if a decoy, might have backup functions. And there could be other triggers he had not yet identified. He radioed back to the command center. Timer is frozen, beginning secondary assessment. Tommy's voice came back, relief clear even through the radio static. Roger that, Master Chief, looking good from here. Do not celebrate yet, son. We are only halfway there. Jack pulled out a multimeter, began testing circuits. The wiring was complex, professional, beautiful in its efficiency, no wasted length, no redundant connections. Every wire had a purpose. This was the work of a master craftsman, someone who took pride in their creation. And then Jack saw it. Hidden beneath the primary detonator, almost invisible among the other wires, a secondary circuit. It ran from the pressure sensor to a small device that Jack did not recognize. He leaned closer, using his mirror to examine it from multiple angles. It was a cellular receiver. Old technology again, probably from the early 2000s, the kind of phone that had been common before smartphones. Why would Volkov include a remote detonation capability? The whole point of mechanical timers was independence from electronic signals. Remote detonation introduced variables, created vulnerabilities. Unless that was the point, unless Volkov wanted a way to trigger the device manually if Jack somehow defeated the other systems. Jack examined the receiver more closely. It was powered by a small battery, separate from the main bomb power. The battery indicator showed it was active, receiving signals, which meant somewhere Volkov or someone working for him was monitoring this device, ready to send the detonation signal if needed. Jack's mind raced. If he disabled the receiver, would that trigger a dead man's switch? If he left it active, could Volkov detonate remotely at any moment? There was no good option, only bad and worse. He made a decision. Sometimes in this business, you had to trust your instincts and accept the risk. He carefully disconnected the receiver's antenna wire, then wrapped the entire device in aluminum foil from his kit, creating a makeshift Faraday cage. The signal indicator on the receiver went dark. No signal in, no signal out. If Volkov tried to detonate remotely now, the signal would not reach. 8 minutes on the frozen timer. Jack worked methodically now, disconnecting each trigger system in sequence. The pressure sensor was bypassed by placing a thin metal plate beneath the device, distributing weight evenly so the sensor read no change. The mercury tilt switch was frozen solid with more liquid nitrogen, the mercury unable to flow even if the device moved. The primary detonator was carefully removed. The wires cut in a sequence that prevented any circuit from completing. Finally, after what felt like hours but was actually 14 minutes, Jack held the detonators in his hand. Separated from the Semtex, the bomb was inert. He radioed back. Device is neutralized. All clear. Send the containment team. The response was immediate. Roger that, Master Chief. Outstanding work. Team is moving in now. Jack sat back on his heels, suddenly exhausted. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline draining away now that the immediate threat had passed. He was too old for this. His body knew it, even if his pride refused to admit it. But there was something else, something that bothered him more than the physical strain. He pulled out his phone, looked again at the message Volkov had sent. Welcome back to the game. Game. Singular, not games, which implied this was not over. This device had been the opening move, not the entire play. Jack stood up, his knees protesting, and walked out of the container. Tommy was running toward him, grinning, followed by Captain Rodriguez and a dozen other officers. They were congratulating him, shaking his hand, slapping his back. He accepted it with the stoic grace of a man who had been through this before, who knew that praise was fleeting, but the mission was eternal. But even as they celebrated, Jack was thinking about Volkov's message, about the singular word, game, and about the fact that Berlin, all those years ago, the device he had defused had been one of 3 planted that night. Intelligence had found the other 2 before they detonated. 3 devices, 3 targets, 1 mission. He pulled away from the celebration, walked back to the command center. Inside, intelligence analysts were already processing the bomb, photographing it, cataloging components. Jack found the senior analyst, a thin man in his 40s wearing FBI credentials. "I need you to check something. Pull all intelligence reports from the last 72 hours. Anything about suspicious packages, cargo inspections, unusual activity at ports or airports. Anything that might indicate other devices." The analyst frowned. "You think this is not the only bomb?" "I know it is not. Volkov works in 3s, always has. This was the first. There will be 2 more. The analyst's face paled. He turned to his computer, began typing rapidly. Jack watched over his shoulder as reports scrolled across the screen. Routine inspections, false alarms, suspicious packages that turned out to be nothing. Then something caught Jack's eye. "Stop. There. That one." The analyst clicked on a report. Port Authority of New York. Suspicious container flagged during inspection, but cleared after secondary scans showed no explosives. Shipped from Rotterdam. Same origin as the Los Angeles device. Jack's blood ran cold. When was this? 3 days ago. Container is already in transit. According to this, it is scheduled for delivery to a commercial address in Manhattan tomorrow morning. Find that container now and check for a 3rd. If there are 2, there are 3. The analyst was already on the phone shouting orders. Within minutes, the command center had transformed from celebration to crisis mode. Federal agents were tracking the container, port authorities were being notified, NYPD bomb squad was being activated. Jack stood at the center of it all, watching the organized chaos, feeling the weight of 3 decades settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. He was 54 years old, 2 weeks from retirement, and somehow he had walked straight into the biggest case of his career. His phone rang. "Colonel Harrison." "Jack, I heard you defused the device." "Well done, but we have a problem." Jack closed his eyes. He already knew what Harrison was going to say. "NSA intercepted encrypted communication 20 minutes ago, partially decoded. The message said, and I quote, 3 gifts for America. First is greeting. Second and third are judgment. Jack, if there are 2 more devices, we need to find them." "I know, sir. We are already tracking 1, possibly headed for New York. Still looking for the 3rd. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came back, harder, more formal. "Jack, I am activating you for emergency operational duty. Your retirement is suspended pending resolution of this crisis. You are now assigned to Task Force Sledgehammer with full authority to coordinate all EOD responses. You report directly to me." Jack opened his eyes, looked around the command center. Tommy was staring at him, having overheard the conversation. The young petty officer's face showed a mixture of excitement and fear. "Understood, sir. What are my assets?" "Everything you need. Transport, personnel, equipment. But Jack, you need to understand something. Intelligence believes Volkov is not working alone. The sophistication of this operation, the timing, the coordination required to plant multiple devices across the country. He has backing, possibly state level." Jack's jaw tightened. "Which state?" "Unknown. Could be Russia, could be someone else using Russian methods. But whoever they are, they want to send a message. And you are the only person we have who understands how Volkov thinks. Then we better find him before he sends that message, sir." Jack ended the call, turned to Tommy. "Pack your gear. We are going to New York." "Sir, what about the 3rd device?" "We will find it. We have to." But as Jack said the words, he was thinking about Volkov's message. 3 gifts. First is greeting. Second and third are judgment. The Los Angeles bomb had been the greeting, found and defused with time to spare. The New York bomb was one of the judgments. But where was the 3rd? And what did Volkov consider worthy of judgment? The answer came 30 minutes later, as Jack and Tommy were boarding a military transport to New York. An intelligence analyst ran up to them, tablet in hand, face white with fear. "Master Chief, we found the 3rd container. Or rather, we think we did. Shipped from Rotterdam, same time frame, same false documentation. But it is not at a port. It was delivered 4 days ago. Jack felt his stomach drop. Delivered where? Naval Station, Norfolk. Addressed to Ship Services, signed for by a civilian contractor. Master Chief, the container is on board the USS Ronald Reagan. Jack's world tilted. The Reagan, Michael's carrier, his son's ship. And according to the manifest, the container is in the munitions storage area directly adjacent to the magazine. If a device detonates there, it will set off a chain reaction. The entire carrier could be destroyed. 5,000 sailors. Jack was already running for the plane. Behind him, Tommy shouted something, but Jack could not hear over the roaring in his ears. 5,000 sailors, including his son, including Michael. He reached the plane, grabbed the pilot by his flight suit. Change of destination. We are going to Norfolk, now, maximum speed. Sir, I have orders to fly you to New York. I am changing those orders. Colonel Harrison will confirm. But we are going to Norfolk first, and we are going right now, or I will fly this bird myself. We clear? The pilot saw something in Jack's face, something that made him nod and start flipping switches without argument. The engine spooled up. Jack strapped in, pulled out his phone, called his son's number. The call went straight to voicemail. Michael was probably in a briefing or in his rack sleeping or up on the flight deck running checks on his aircraft. Wherever he was, he did not answer. Jack left a message, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. Michael, this is your father. I need you to listen carefully. There is a credible threat to the Reagan. I cannot explain details, but you need to get off that ship, right now. Find any excuse, volunteer for shore duty, fake an injury, I do not care. Just get off the ship. Please, son, trust me on this. He ended the call, stared at the phone, willing it to ring back. It did not. The plane lifted off, banked east, engine screaming as the pilot pushed for maximum speed. Jack looked out the window at Los Angeles falling away below, at the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, at the vast distance between him and his son. 32 years in the Navy, thousands of missions, hundreds of devices defused, and now at the end of his career with 2 weeks until retirement, everything came down to this, a Cold War ghost, 3 bombs, and a son who had stopped talking to his father. Jack closed his eyes and did something he had not done since Margaret died. He prayed, please, let me get there in time. Let me save him. I will give anything, my career, my medals, my life. Just let me save my son. The plane flew on through the morning sky, racing toward Norfolk, toward the carrier, toward whatever judgment Alexander Volkov had prepared. And Jack Dalton, Master Chief Petty Officer, 54 years old, 2 weeks from retirement, 32 years of service, sat in the darkness behind his closed eyes and felt every one of those years pressing down on him like the weight of all the lives he had saved and all the lives he had failed to save. The clock was ticking. Somewhere on that carrier, a bomb waited, and with it, his son. 2 weeks until retirement, but first, he had to survive today. The V-22 Osprey tiltrotor screamed through the sky at maximum speed, its hybrid design allowing it to fly faster than any conventional helicopter. Rotors tilted forward in airplane mode. The aircraft pushed past 300 miles per hour, engines straining against the limits of their design. Jack Dalton sat in the crew bay, strapped into a jump seat that had carried thousands of warriors to thousands of battles, his mind racing faster than the aircraft. Norfolk was 300 miles away. Even at this unprecedented speed, they would not arrive for another 28 minutes. 28 minutes while a bomb sat in the munitions magazine of an aircraft carrier. 28 minutes while his son walked the decks, unaware that death waited below. Tommy sat across from him, also strapped in, his young face showing the kind of focus that came when training suddenly became real. The petty officer had his tablet out, reviewing technical schematics of the Ronald Reagan's internal layout. Smart kid, always preparing, always studying. Jack recognized that drive because he had lived it for 3 decades. The loadmaster, a grizzled Air Force sergeant who looked like he had been flying since Vietnam, made his way back to them, holding 2 metal cups of coffee that sloshed with the aircraft's vibration. He handed them to Jack and Tommy without a word. The coffee was black, bitter, strong enough to strip paint. Military coffee, the kind that kept men awake through impossible hours and impossible missions. Jack sipped it, barely tasting it. His mind was in Norfolk, in the carrier's magazines, seeing scenarios play out. Best case, They arrived, located the container, found the device, defused it with time to spare. Worst case, the bomb detonated while they were still in flight, and Jack would watch from 300 miles away as his son died. There were scenarios between those extremes, but Jack's mind kept returning to the worst one. That was how you survived in EOD. You planned for the worst and hoped for the best. Hope was not a strategy, but it was sometimes all you had. His phone buzzed. Colonel Harrison calling on the encrypted line. Jack answered immediately. Jack, I have an update, and you are not going to like it. Jack's grip on the coffee cup tightened. Sir, NSA finished decoding more of the intercepted communications. The message mentioned your name specifically. Volkov knows you are hunting him. More than that, he wants you hunting him. This whole operation is designed to draw you out. The device in Los Angeles was bait. The carrier is the trap. Jack felt cold despite the coffee. If Volkov wanted him specifically, that changed everything. This was not just terrorism. This was personal. A challenge. A duel between two old warriors who had faced each other once before and never forgotten. Sir, if he wanted to kill me, he could have triggered the LA device remotely while I was working on it. He had a cellular receiver. He could have detonated any time. Exactly. Which means he does not want you dead. He wants you tested. He wants to prove something. Intelligence psych profile suggests he is dying. Cancer, maybe a year to live. This is his legacy operation, his final statement. Jack absorbed that. A dying man with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The most dangerous kind of enemy. What does that mean for the carrier, sir? It means the device on the Reagan is designed to challenge you specifically. It will be sophisticated. It will be deadly. And it will be built around his understanding of how you think. He studied you, Jack. After Berlin, he probably tracked your career, analyzed your techniques. He knows you as well as you know him. Then I better remember everything I learned about him. There is more. The third device, the one headed to New York. We located the container. It is in a warehouse in Queens, scheduled for delivery to an address in Lower Manhattan. FBI is moving to intercept, but they want an EOD specialist on site, someone who knows Volkov's work. Jack looked at Tommy. The young petty officer was watching him, waiting for orders, ready to do whatever was needed. Good sailor, steady under pressure. Not as experienced as Jack, but experience could not be rushed. You either survived long enough to gain it, or you died trying. Send Petty Officer Reeves to New York. He has seen Volkov's work now. He can handle it. Tommy's eyes widened. Sir, I should stay with you. 2 techs are better than 1. Negative. If both devices detonate, the Navy loses 2 EOD specialists. We spread the risk. You go to New York, I go to Norfolk. We each handle our target. That is how it has to be. Tommy opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He understood. This was not about preference or protocol. This was about maximizing their chances of stopping both bombs. If one of them failed, at least the other might succeed. Jack turned back to the phone. Sir, arrange transport for Petty Officer Reeves. Have him dropped at McGuire Air Force Base, then fast transport to New York. Get him on site within 3 hours. Done, sir. And Jack, the psych profile on Volkov suggests he respects courage and skill. If you face him directly, if it comes to that, do not try to manipulate him. Be honest, be direct. He values those traits. It might buy you leverage. Jack thought about the message Volkov had sent. Welcome back to the game. There was respect in those words, maybe even affection, in the twisted way that warriors sometimes felt toward worthy opponents. Understood, sir. Dalton out. He ended the call, looked at Tommy. The younger man was already gathering his gear, checking his equipment, preparing for the mission that would test everything he had learned. Tommy, listen to me. When you get to New York, do not rush. Volkov's devices punish haste. Take your time. Study it. Think about what he wants you to do, then do something else. Sir, what if I am not good enough? What if I fail? Jack stood up, walked over to Tommy, put a hand on the younger man's shoulder. The same shoulder where Jack's own mentor had placed a hand 30 years ago, before Jack's first real defusal, speaking words that Jack still remembered. You are good enough because I trained you, and I do not waste time on sailors who cannot handle the mission. You have the skills. You have the knowledge. Now you need to trust yourself. Fear is normal. Use it. Let it make you careful, not paralyzed. Tommy nodded, and Jack saw the fear settle into something more useful. Determination. Focus. The transformation that happened when a warrior accepted the mission and committed to seeing it through. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Master Chief, we are approaching McGuire, preparing to drop Petty Officer Reeves. The loadmaster appeared again, gesturing for Tommy to move toward the jump door. The Osprey was not landing. It would slow just enough for Tommy to jump with his gear, then continue to Norfolk. Time was the enemy now. Every second counted. Tommy strapped on his parachute, grabbed his go bag. He looked at Jack one last time. Sir, when this is over, when we both make it through this, I am buying you a beer. A real one. Not that military base garbage. Jack allowed himself a small, tired smile. Deal, but you are buying two. One for me, one for you. We will toast to surviving. Tommy moved to the door. The loadmaster opened it, and wind screamed into the cargo bay, loud as a hurricane, cold as ice. Below, Jack could see the New Jersey landscape, tiny and distant. Tommy stood at the edge, checked his equipment one last time, then gave Jack a thumbs up. Jack returned the gesture. Tommy jumped, falling into the void, his parachute deploying seconds later like a flower blooming. The loadmaster closed the door, sealing the cargo bay again. The sudden silence felt wrong, empty. Jack sat back down, alone now except for the loadmaster and pilots. Alone with his thoughts and his fear and his determination to save his son. The Osprey banked, adjusting course for Norfolk. Jack pulled out his phone, tried Michael's number again. Still no answer. He considered calling the Reagan's command center, having them pull Michael out of whatever he was doing, but that would raise questions, would create panic. And if the bomb had any kind of monitoring system, any way for Volkov to know that the carrier was alerted, it might trigger early detonation. Number. Better to arrive quietly, locate the device, neutralize it before anyone except the captain and senior officers knew there was a threat. That was how these things worked. Silent professionals handling silent threats so that the world could sleep peacefully, unaware of how close disaster had come. Jack closed his eyes, but he did not sleep. He was thinking about Berlin again. That cold night in 1989, the wall about to fall, history pivoting on the edge of change. He had been so young, 23 years old, barely out of training, convinced he was invincible. The device had been in a car parked near a checkpoint, timed to explode during a diplomatic convoy. East German border guards had spotted it, called it in, and Jack's unit had responded. He remembered the senior chief who had been in charge. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, a legend in EOD circles, a man who had defused more devices than most technicians ever saw. Webb had examined the bomb, recognized immediately that it was beyond standard protocols, and had turned to Jack. Dalton, this one is yours. I'm too old and too slow. You are young and fast. If anyone can beat this thing, it is you. Jack had protested, had said that Webb was the expert, that Jack was too inexperienced. Webb had cut him off. Experience is knowing when to step aside. This bomb was built by someone brilliant. It needs someone who can think outside the manual. That is you. So Jack had approached the device, hands shaking from cold and fear, and had worked for 2 hours in the freezing rain while Webb coached him over the radio. And somehow, impossibly, Jack had succeeded, had found the hidden vulnerability that Volkov had built into his creation, had frozen the mechanism and disconnected the detonators with seconds to spare. Afterward, Webb had clapped him on the shoulder, grinning like a proud father. You just beat the best bomb maker the Soviets have. Remember this feeling. This is what we do. We face the impossible and make it possible. Webb had died 3 years later. Heart attack, peacefully in his sleep, which was more mercy than most EOD techs received. But before he died, he had written a letter to Jack. The letter was in Jack's desk drawer at home, read so many times that the paper was soft as cloth. The letter said, "You have the gift, Dalton, the ability to see what others miss, to think past the obvious, to survive situations that should kill you. Do not waste it. Train the next generation. Pass on what you know. That is how we win. Not by being immortal, but by making sure our knowledge outlives us." Jack had carried those words for 3 decades, had trained hundreds of sailors, passed on every lesson he had learned, tried to ensure that his knowledge would survive even after he was gone. Tommy was part of that legacy. So were dozens of other EOD techs serving around the world, many of whom Jack had trained or whose trainers Jack had trained. That was the real victory, not the medals or the commendations or the successful defusals. The victory was in the chain of knowledge, each generation teaching the next, ensuring that the skills survived even when the individual warriors did not. The intercom crackled. Master Chief, We are 30 minutes from Norfolk. Wind is favorable. We will be on the ground in less than half an hour. Jack opened his eyes, checked his gear. Everything was ready. Wire cutters, mirrors, probes, liquid nitrogen, electronic testing equipment. Tools that had saved his life dozens of times. Tools that he hoped would save 5,000 lives today. His phone buzzed again. This time it was not Harrison. It was a text message from an unknown number. Jack's stomach tightened as he opened it. The message read, "Your son is a good pilot, talented, brave. It would be a shame if he died because his father was too slow. The device is on a timer, Jack. No remote detonation this time. You must reach it, find it, and defeat it before the clock runs out. You have 4 hours from the moment you land. Good luck. You will need it." Below the message was a photograph. Michael in his flight suit, walking across the Reagan's flight deck, sun behind him, caught mid-stride. The photo had been taken recently, maybe today, which meant Volkov or someone working for him had been on the carrier, had walked the same decks as Michael, had been close enough to photograph him. Jack's hands clenched into fists. This was beyond terrorism now. This was targeting his family. His son, the only person Jack had left in the world who mattered more than the mission. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Anger was natural, but anger clouded judgment. And right now, Jack needed perfect clarity, perfect focus. 4 hours from landing. That was the timeline. Jack checked his watch. The Osprey would land in 28 minutes, which meant he would have 3 hours and 32 minutes to locate a device hidden somewhere in the massive complex that was an aircraft carrier, examine it, understand its mechanisms, and defeat it. 3.5 hours to save his son. The Osprey began its descent. Jack felt the change in air pressure, the slight lurch as the aircraft dropped altitude. Below, he could see the Virginia coast, the massive naval complex at Norfolk, and in the harbor, the USS Ronald Reagan. 90,000 tons of American military power, floating city carrying 5,000 souls, one of which was his son. The aircraft touched down, its rotors transitioning back to vertical for landing, the unique capability that made the V-22 invaluable for rapid insertion. The moment the wheels stopped rolling, the loadmaster opened the cargo door and Jack was moving, gear bag over his shoulder, boots hitting the tarmac at a run. A Navy commander was waiting beside a Jeep, looking stressed and urgent. Master Chief Dalton, Commander Sarah Mitchell, Reagan's executive officer. Captain Davis is waiting aboard the ship. We have a situation. Jack threw his gear into the Jeep, climbed in. Mitchell accelerated before he had fully settled into the seat, racing across the base toward the docks. "How much does the crew know?" Jack asked. "Nothing. Captain has kept it to senior officers only. As far as the crew knows, we are conducting a routine security drill. But Master Chief, we have 5,000 sailors on that ship. If we need to evacuate, it will take hours. Hours we do not have if your intelligence is correct. We are not evacuating. Evacuation will trigger the device. Volkov is expecting that. He wants panic, wants chaos, wants us to make mistakes under pressure." Mitchell glanced at him and Jack saw doubt in her eyes. "With respect, Master Chief, my job is to protect this crew. If there is a bomb in our magazines, we should evacuate immediately. If there were time, I would agree with you. But Volkov does not give us time. He gives us choices, all of them bad. Evacuate and trigger the device, or stay and try to defuse it. I am choosing to stay and defuse. And if you fail, then 5,000 people die, including your crew, my son and me. But at least we will die trying to stop it rather than running from it." Mitchell's jaw tightened, but she nodded. She understood. In the military, sometimes there were no good options, only the least bad option. And sometimes the least bad option required courage that felt indistinguishable from suicide. They reached the dock. The Reagan loomed above them, massive beyond comprehension, a floating fortress of steel and technology. The carrier's hull stretched over 1,000 feet, its island rising 7 stories above the flight deck. Somewhere inside that maze of compartments and corridors, a bomb waited. Jack and Mitchell boarded via the officer's brow, moving quickly through security, then down into the ship's interior. The carrier was a world unto itself, cramped and industrial, every surface painted gray or white, pipes and wiring running along the ceilings, the constant hum of machinery providing a bass note to the ship's symphony. Sailors moved through the corridors with the practiced efficiency of people who knew every inch of their environment, calling out warnings as they passed, maintaining the careful dance that kept the ship functioning. None of them knew that death was somewhere nearby, counting down the seconds until their world exploded. Mitchell led Jack deep into the ship, down several levels, past berthing areas and mess halls and equipment rooms, until they reached the forward magazines. Here, the corridors narrowed, the security increased. Armed Marines stood at checkpoints, checking credentials. These were the most sensitive areas of the ship, where missiles and ammunition were stored, where a single spark could trigger catastrophic detonation. Captain Davis waited outside the magazine entrance. He was in his 50s, gray hair cut short, eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that came from commanding thousands of men in situations where mistakes meant death. He extended his hand to Jack. "Master Chief, thank you for coming. We have located the container. It was signed for by a civilian contractor 4 days ago, supposed to contain replacement parts for fire suppression systems. Standard delivery, nothing unusual. Except the contractor does not exist. The company name on the manifest is fake. Where's the container now?" "In Magazine 3, stored with other supply containers awaiting inventory. We have not opened it, have not moved it, have not done anything except confirm its location." Smart. Very smart. Jack felt a measure of relief. If they had moved the container, examined it, tried to open it, the bomb might have already detonated. "I need to see it now, and Captain, I need you to understand something. This device is designed by someone who knows military protocols. He knows you want to evacuate. He knows you want to call in additional support. He knows all the things you are trained to do in this situation, and he has planned for all of them. Our best chance is to do nothing except let me work." Davis studied Jack's face, measuring the man who was asking for trust without offering guarantees. Then the captain nodded. "You have operational authority, Master Chief. My ship is yours, whatever you need. I need access to the magazine, 2 sailors to help move containers if necessary, and I need everyone else to continue normal operations. No alarms, no alerts, no changes to routine. If Volkov is monitoring this ship, and I believe he is, we cannot give him any indication that we know about the device." Davis turned to Mitchell. "Make it happen. And Sarah, if this goes wrong, if Master Chief Dalton fails, I want you to get as many people off this ship as possible in whatever time remains. Understood?" Mitchell's face was pale but determined. "Understood, sir." They moved into the magazine, a vast space filled with ordnance racks and supply containers. The air smelled of oil and metal and the peculiar scent that all military storage areas shared, a mixture of preservation chemicals and confined spaces. Jack's eyes scanned the room, cataloging, analyzing, looking for anything that seemed wrong. There, a storage container marked with the fake company logo nestled between 2 other containers. It was maybe 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, unremarkable except for the fact that it contained death. Jack approached carefully, pulling out his portable scanner. He ran it over the container's surface, looking for electronic signatures, heat sources, anything that would tell him what was inside. The scanner picked up electronics, active circuits, a power source. The bomb was inside, definitely. Jack checked his watch. 3 hours and 8 minutes remaining. If Volkov's message was accurate, the timer was counting down even now. 3 hours to save 5,000 lives, no pressure. He had examined the container's seals. They had not been broken. Good. That meant the device was still in its original configuration, had not been tampered with since Volkov planted it. Jack pulled out his tools, selected a thin blade designed for breaking seals without triggering pressure sensors. "Captain, I need you and Commander Mitchell to step back, at least 50 feet. If this goes wrong, you need to be outside the immediate kill radius." "Master Chief, I am not leaving my ship." "With respect, sir, if you die in the next 5 minutes, your crew needs Commander Mitchell to lead them. You staying here serves no purpose except making us both feel brave. Courage is good, survival is better." Davis hesitated, then nodded. He and Mitchell withdrew to the magazine entrance. Jack was alone now, facing the container, his hands steady despite the fear that lived in his chest like a cold stone. He carefully broke the seals, opened the container lid. Inside, nested in packing material, was a device that made Jack's breath catch in his throat. It was beautiful. That was the first thought, unbidden and unwelcome, but true nonetheless. The device was a work of art, precision engineering that would have been impressive in any context, horrifying in this one. Semtex molded into shaped charges, arranged around a central mechanism that gleamed with brass and steel. Multiple trigger systems, each one elegant in its complexity. And at the heart of it all, a mechanical timer showing 2 hours and 53 minutes remaining. But there was something else, something that made Jack's hands start to shake. At the base of the device, partially hidden by the explosives, was a small speaker. And from that speaker came a voice, Volkov's voice, speaking English with a Russian accent, calm and almost friendly. "Hello, Jack Dalton. If you are hearing this, you have found my device. Congratulations. You are as skilled as I remembered. Now comes the real test. This device has 5 trigger systems: mechanical timer, pressure sensor, tilt switch, thermal sensor, and a dead man switch. Disable one incorrectly, and the others will compensate. You must disable all 5 simultaneously, or the device will detonate." Jack listened, his mind racing through scenarios. "But I am not cruel, Jack. I will give you a chance. The dead man switch requires a code to be entered every 30 minutes. The code is an answer to a question only you can answer. The question is this: in Berlin, at the Brandenburg Gate, when you defused my device, what was the temperature of the liquid nitrogen when you applied it to the timer mechanism? Give me the answer in Celsius, to the nearest degree, and you may proceed with the defusal. You have 5 minutes to answer. If you do not answer, or if you answer incorrectly, the device detonates immediately. The keypad is on the side of the timer. Good luck, old friend." The recording ended. Jack stared at the device, his mind going back 35 years. Berlin, the Brandenburg Gate, the freezing rain, the device that should have killed him but did not. What was the temperature of the liquid nitrogen? Jack closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember. He had been young, terrified, working by instinct more than knowledge. Chief Webb had coached him through the process. Apply the nitrogen, wait for the mechanism to freeze, disconnect the detonators. But the temperature, had he measured it? He must have. Standard procedure was to verify temperature before application. But 35 years ago, in the rain, with his hands shaking, had he followed standard procedure? Think, remember. He saw himself, young and scared, holding the nitrogen canister. Saw Chief Webb's voice in his ear, telling him to check the gauge. Saw his own hands, numb from cold, reading the dial. 196 degrees Celsius. No, that was not right. That was the boiling point of nitrogen. Too high. Minus 196. That was it. Liquid nitrogen at minus 196 degrees Celsius. Jack opened his eyes, found the keypad. His finger hovered over the numbers. If he was wrong, if his memory had failed him, the device would detonate. 5,000 people would die, including his son. But if he did not answer, the result would be the same. He entered the numbers. Negative 196. Silence. The device continued ticking. Jack held his breath. Then from the speaker, Volkov's voice again. "Correct. Well remembered, Jack. You may proceed. But be warned, there are 4 more questions, and each one will be harder than the last." Jack let out his breath slowly. 4 more questions. 4 more chances to fail. This was Volkov's game. Not just a physical challenge, but a psychological one. Testing not just Jack's skill, but his memory, his knowledge, his ability to think clearly under pressure. 3 hours remaining, 5 trigger systems, 4 more questions. And somewhere on this ship, his son walked the decks, unaware that his father was fighting to save his life. Jack pulled out his tools, began examining the first trigger system. The mechanical timer was obvious, counting down with mechanical precision. But disabling it would trigger the other systems. He needed to understand all 5 before touching any. His phone buzzed. Tommy, texting from New York. On site, device located, beginning assessment. Looks similar to LA device, but more complex. Will update soon. Jack texted back. Be careful. Trust your training. He pocketed the phone, returned his attention to the Reagan device. The pressure sensor was beneath the bomb, measuring the weight of the device against the container floor. Standard design, remove the bomb, trigger detonation. But there was something odd about the placement. The sensor was slightly off-center, as if Volkov had positioned it carelessly. Volkov did not do careless, which meant the position was deliberate, a tell, a hint. Jack pulled out his mirror, examined the underside of the device without moving it. There. Hidden beneath the pressure sensor, almost invisible, was a second sensor, a true pressure sensor, while the visible one was a decoy. Clever. Anyone who tried to bypass the obvious sensor would miss the real one. 2 layers of defense, one obvious, one hidden. Jack made a note in his waterproof notebook. This was going to be complicated. The tilt switch was visible through the clear casing, mercury gleaming silver in its glass tube. Move the device more than a few degrees in any direction, and the mercury would flow, complete the circuit, trigger detonation. Standard design, reliable, nearly impossible to defeat without specialized equipment. But wait, Jack leaned closer. The tilt switch tube was not level. It was tilted approximately 5 degrees from horizontal. Deliberate or installation error? Number. Volkov did not make errors. The tilt was intentional, which meant the switch was not sensitive to small movements. It was set to trigger only on major disturbance. Another false threat, meant to make Jack cautious, meant to consume time. The thermal sensor was more interesting. It was monitoring the temperature of the explosive itself. If the temperature changed too rapidly, either from heating or cooling, it would trigger detonation, which meant Jack could not use his usual technique of freezing the mechanism. Volkov had learned from Berlin, adapted, built-in countermeasures. The dead man's switch was the real problem. Every 30 minutes, Jack would need to answer another question about Berlin. 5 questions total. If he missed one, immediate detonation, no second chances. It was elegant, cruel but elegant. Volkov was forcing Jack to relive the moment that defined his career while simultaneously defusing a device that could kill thousands. Psychological warfare at its finest. Jack's phone vibrated. Another text from Tommy. Found the false solution. Obvious red wire is a trap. Going to try alternative approach. Jack's heart rate increased. Tommy was thinking, adapting, not following protocols blindly. Good. That was how you survive Volkov's devices. But there was no time to focus on Tommy's situation. Jack had his own bomb to deal with, his own battle to fight. He began the slow, methodical process of mapping the device. Every wire, every circuit, every connection. Drawing diagrams in his notebook, noting colors and positions and relationships. This would take hours, but there was no shortcut. Understanding had to come before action. 2 hours and 30 minutes remaining. From the magazine entrance, Captain Davis watched in silence. Jack could feel the man's stress, the weight of command that required him to trust a stranger with his ship and crew. But Davis said nothing, did nothing to interfere. Good captain. Knew when to lead and when to let experts work. Jack's phone buzzed again. This time it was not Tommy. It was a call from Michael. Jack's heart nearly stopped. He answered immediately. Michael, son, where are you? Dad? Why did you leave that message about getting off the ship? What is going on? Michael's voice was confused, concerned, but not panicked. He did not know. Thank God he did not know. Son, I cannot explain right now, but I need you to trust me. I need you to go to the flight deck, get in your aircraft, and stay there until I call you back. Can you do that? Dad, you are scaring me. What is happening? Michael, please. I have never asked you to trust me blindly. I am asking now. Get to your aircraft. Stay there. Do not ask questions. I will explain everything later. There was silence on the other end. Jack could almost hear his son thinking, weighing, deciding whether to trust the father who had missed so many moments in his life. Then Michael spoke, his voice quieter. Okay, Dad, I'm going now. But you better have a damn good explanation when this is over. I will, son, I promise. And Michael, I love you. I should have said that more often. I am saying it now. Another silence, then barely audible. I love you too, Dad. The call ended. Jack stood there, phone in hand, feeling something break loose in his chest. A tightness he had carried for 3 years, since Margaret died, since Michael stopped calling. Maybe longer, maybe since the day he joined the Navy and chose duty over everything else. He put the phone away, returned to the device. 2 hours and 14 minutes remaining. Time to get to work. Time to prove that an old warrior could still face the impossible and make it possible. Time to save his son. Jack Dalton's hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, the steadiness of a man who had performed this dance with death 1,000 times before. 2 hours and 14 minutes on the timer. 5 trigger systems networked together in a web of wires and circuits that would take most bomb techs days to fully understand. But Jack did not have days. He had barely 2 hours to map every connection, understand every relationship, and find the vulnerability that Volkov had built into this masterpiece. Because there would be a vulnerability. Volkov always left one, not out of mercy, but out of pride. He wanted his devices to be beatable by someone brilliant enough, skilled enough, worthy enough. The question was whether Jack, at 54 years old with hands that sometimes trembled and a mind that carried 3 decades of trauma, was still worthy. The magazine around him hummed with the carrier's mechanical heartbeat. Ventilation systems pushed air through the massive ship. Pumps circulated water through cooling systems. Generators provided power to a floating city that consumed more electricity in a day than most small towns used in a month. And somewhere above him, 5,000 sailors went about their duties, unaware that their lives hung in the balance of one old man's ability to think like a Soviet bomb maker. Jack traced the pressure sensor wiring with a wooden probe, careful not to complete any circuits, not to shift any weights. The sensor beneath the device was the true threat, hidden beneath the obvious one. Classic Volkov. Always 2 layers. Always the false threat to distract from the real one. But now that Jack had identified both sensors, he could plan around them. The thermal sensor was more problematic. It monitored temperature changes within a narrow band. Too hot, detonation. Too cold, detonation. Which meant Jack's usual technique of freezing mechanisms was off the table. He would have to work at room temperature, relying on mechanical disconnection rather than thermal shutdown. His phone buzzed. Text from Tommy in New York. Device has similar thermal sensor. Cannot freeze. Working alternative approach. Will update in 30 minutes. Jack texted back. Good thinking. Stay safe. He checked his watch. 28 minutes until the first answer was required. 28 minutes until Volkov's voice would ask another question about Berlin, testing Jack's memory, testing his focus, testing whether he could work a bomb and recall precise details from 3 decades ago simultaneously. The psychological pressure was exquisite. Volkov understood that bomb disposal required total concentration. By forcing Jack to split his attention between the present and the past, Volkov was introducing doubt, hesitation, the kind of distraction that killed technicians. But Volkov had made one mistake. He assumed Jack's memory of Berlin was clouded by time. It was not. Jack remembered that night with crystalline clarity, Fohi. Every detail, every moment, every decision was burned into his memory like a brand. Some experiences were too intense to fade. Berlin was one of them. Baghdad was another. The night Margaret died was a third. The human mind did not forget trauma. It stored it in perfect detail, ready to be recalled at any moment, whether wanted or not. Jack continued mapping the device. The mechanical timer was the heart of the system, brass gears turning with watchmaker precision. Beautiful engineering. In another context, it would be worth studying, preserving, displaying. In this context, it was simply a countdown to catastrophe. The tilt switch was positioned at that odd angle, 5 degrees off level. Jack pulled out his notebook, did quick calculations. At that angle, the switch would only trigger if the device was moved more than 15 degrees. Significant movement, not the hair trigger that the switch's presence suggested. Another false threat meant to make Jack overly cautious. The dead man's switch was the crown jewel of Volkov's design. A speaker that would broadcast questions, a keypad for answers, and presumably circuitry that would verify responses and either allow the defusal to continue or trigger immediate detonation. Elegant, personal, cruel. Captain Davis appeared at the magazine entrance, maintaining his 50-foot distance but unable to stay away. His ship, his crew, his responsibility. Jack understood. Command was a burden that never lightened, a weight that followed you even into sleep. Master Chief, do you need anything? Additional personnel? Different tools? Jack did not look up from the device. Just time, Captain, and silence. I need to think. Davis nodded and withdrew. Good man. Knew when his presence was helpful and when it was interference. Jack's phone rang. Colonel Harrison on the encrypted line. Jack considered not answering, but Harrison would not call unless it was critical. Sir, Jack, we have a development. NSA intercepted another communication. This one was not encrypted. It was sent in the clear, deliberately meant for us to read. Volkov is taunting us. Jack continued working while listening, his hands disconnecting a secondary wire from the pressure sensor assembly. What did it say? It said, and I quote, 3 gifts for America. The first you found and stopped. The second and third are in progress. But the fourth is the one that matters. The fourth is my legacy. Jack, there is a fourth device. We have been searching for three, but there are four. Jack's hands froze. 4 devices, not 3. Volkov had lied in his first message, or perhaps the intelligence had misinterpreted. Either way, there was another bomb somewhere, and they had no idea where. Sir, any indication of location? Nothing. FBI is analyzing the message for clues. CIA is checking international chatter. But Jack, the message specifically mentioned you. It said, Jack Dalton will understand where the fourth device is because he knows me better than anyone. He knows what I value. He knows what would hurt most. Jack's mind raced. What would Volkov value? What would be the ultimate target for a dying Soviet bomb maker who wanted to leave a legacy? Not just casualties, not just infrastructure damage, something symbolic, something that would be studied and remembered for generations. The Pentagon? No, too obvious and too hardened a target. The White House? Possible, but security there was nearly impenetrable. What would hurt America in a way that demonstrated Soviet engineering superiority over American technology? The answer hit him like a physical blow. Naval EOD School, the place where every Navy bomb technician was trained, the repository of knowledge, techniques, and institutional memory. Destroy it and you would set back American EOD capabilities by years. More importantly, you would make a statement that Soviet craftsmanship could defeat the very institution that taught Americans how to fight it. Sir, check Naval EOD School at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. If there is a fourth device, that is where it would be. Why there specifically? Because Volkov is not just a bomb maker, he is a teacher. And destroying a school, the place where knowledge is passed down, that would be his ultimate statement. That his knowledge, his skill, his legacy will outlive American attempts to counter it. Harrison was silent for 3 seconds. Checking now. Jack, that is brilliant and terrifying. If you are right, we have dozens of EOD students at risk. Evacuate quietly. Do not alarm. Just get people out. And sir, send a senior tech to examine the building. Volkov will have hidden it well. Already on it. Harrison out. Jack returned his attention to the device in front of him. 1 hour and 52 minutes remaining. 4 bombs, not 3. But he could only focus on the one in front of him. The one that threatened his son. His phone buzzed again. Tommy. Made progress. Disabled pressure sensor. Thermal sensor still active. Timer shows 90 minutes. Am I doing this right? Jack texted back. You are doing fine. Trust your instincts. Remember, Volkov respects intelligence. Think past the obvious. He pocketed the phone. Tommy would make it or he would not. Jack had trained him as well as possible. Now the young man had to prove he had learned the lessons. That was how it worked in this business. Training took you only so far. Eventually, you had to face the device alone and trust that your preparation was sufficient. Jack checked his watch. 5 minutes until the next question. He positioned himself in front of the speaker and keypad, his notebook open to the page where he had written everything he could remember about Berlin. At exactly 30 minutes after he had answered the first question, Volkov's voice emerged from the speaker. Calm, almost friendly with that accent that marked him as educated but foreign. Question 2. Jack Dalton. In Berlin, when you approached my device, there were 3 wires visible on the primary detonator. Red, blue, and yellow. You cut none of them. Wait, Jack did not hesitate, because they were all connected to the same circuit. Cutting anyone would have completed the circuit and triggered detonation. The real power wire was hidden beneath the housing, colored gray to blend with the metal. There was a pause, then Volkov's voice again, and Jack could hear something in it. Approval? Respect? Correct. You were smarter than I expected that night. Most technicians would have cut the red wire. 37 American and British EOD specialists have died in my devices by cutting the obvious wire. You did not. You thought, you studied, you survived. That is why we are here today, Jack, because you are worthy of this challenge. The speaker went silent. Jack allowed himself a breath. 2 questions down, 3 remaining, and with each question, he was buying time to work on the device. He returned to the bomb, examining the dead man's switch more closely. It was not just a speaker and keypad. There was also a small camera, barely visible, tucked into the mechanism. Volkov was watching, or recording. Either way, he wanted to see Jack's face, see his reactions, capture the moment for posterity, or study, or perhaps just satisfaction. Jack looked directly into the camera lens. "I am going to beat this, Alexander, and then I am coming for you." He did not expect a response, but the speaker crackled to life anyway. "I hope you do beat it, Jack. I truly do. Because if you fail, if you die here, then I will have no one left worth fighting. At our age, worthy opponents are rare. I would rather you live and hunt me than die and deprive me of a proper ending." The speaker went silent again. Jack stared at it, processing what he had just heard. Volkov wanted to be caught, wanted the confrontation. This entire operation was not about terrorism or casualties or making a political statement. It was about legacy, about creating a final chapter worthy of a master craftsman, about facing the one opponent who had ever defeated him and settling the score once and for all. Understanding that changed everything. If Volkov wanted Jack to succeed here, then the device was designed to be difficult but not impossible. The vulnerability would be there, hidden but findable. Jack just had to think like Volkov. Had to understand what a dying Soviet engineer would consider elegant. 1 hour and 37 minutes remaining. Jack focused on the mechanical timer. The gears were visible through clear casing, an ostentatious display of craftsmanship. Most bomb makers hid their mechanisms, protected them, made them opaque. Volkov showed his work, like a chef working in an open kitchen, proud of his skill, wanting the audience to appreciate the artistry. That pride was the vulnerability. Volkov had made the timer visible because he wanted Jack to see it, to appreciate it, to understand the complexity. But visibility worked both ways. If Jack could see the mechanism, he could understand it. And if he could understand it, he could defeat it. Jack pulled out a magnifying lens, studied the gears in detail. Standard clockwork design, mainspring providing power, escapement mechanism regulating the release of that power, gears translating rotation into the countdown displayed on the timer face. But there was something odd about one of the gears. It was slightly larger than necessary for its position in the mechanism, and it had an unusual number of teeth, not a standard gear, custom made. Jack counted the teeth. 47, an odd number for a gear, literally odd, not divisible evenly. Why 47? There had to be a reason. Volkov did nothing without reason. 47 people killed in Volkov's previous attacks. That was the number intelligence had provided. 47 deaths across 9 bombings over 4 years. Was that a coincidence? Or was Volkov literally building his body count into his final device? Jack examined the gear more closely. The teeth were not uniform. Some were slightly longer than others. He counted the longer teeth. 5 of them, positioned at irregular intervals around the gear. 5 trigger systems, 5 longer teeth, each tooth representing a trigger. Understanding dawned. The gear was not just part of the timer mechanism. It was a map, a physical representation of the device's structure. Volkov was showing Jack how to defeat the bomb, hidden in plain sight, visible to anyone who knew how to look. Jack traced the gear's connections. It meshed with 4 other gears, each of which connected to one of the trigger systems. The 5th trigger, the dead man switch, was connected directly to the mainspring. If Jack could remove the 47-tooth gear without disrupting the other gears, he could isolate the trigger systems from the timer. They would remain active, but they would no longer be connected to the countdown. He could then disable each trigger individually without worrying about cascade failures. It was brilliant, elegant, the kind of solution that required understanding not just mechanics, but psychology. Volkov had hidden the answer in the most visible place, trusting that only someone who truly understood him would recognize it. Jack pulled out his finest precision tools. Removing the gear would require steady hands and perfect timing. The mechanism was under tension from the mainspring. One wrong move and the entire assembly would shift, potentially triggering one of the systems. His phone buzzed. Tommy again. Figured it out. Device has a false circuit board. Real triggers are behind it. Am I right? Jack smiled despite the tension. Tommy was learning, was thinking like Volkov. That was good. That was how you survived. He texted back. Correct. Remove carefully. Do not rush. Jack checked his watch. 28 minutes until the next question. But he could not wait. The gear removal would take at least 15 minutes if everything went perfectly, longer if complications arose. He needed to start now. He positioned his tools, steadied his breathing, and began the delicate process of releasing the gear from its spindle. The mechanism was tight, designed to resist tampering, But Jack had spent 3 decades working with the mechanical systems. His hands knew what to do even when his mind doubted. 5 minutes into the process, his phone rang. Not a text this time, a call from Michael. Jack almost ignored it, but something made him answer, keeping one hand on the gear, the other holding the phone to his ear. "Dad? Are you okay? You told me to stay in my aircraft and you would explain. It has been an hour. What is going on?" Michael's voice was worried, confused, the tone of a son who had learned not to expect explanations but still hope for them. Jack kept his voice steady, calm, even as his hand worked to lift the gear 0.5 millimeter at a time. "Son, I am fine, but I need you to stay where you are. Do not leave the aircraft. Do not tell anyone I called. Can you do that for me?" "Dad, you are scaring me. Is something wrong with the ship? Are we under attack?" Jack wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to explain about Volkov and the bomb and the fact that his father was currently trying to dismantle a device that could kill everyone Michael served with. But there was no time for the full story, no time for the truth that would only create panic. "Michael, there is a situation. I'm handling it. But I need to know you are safe, and the safest place for you right now is in your aircraft, on the flight deck, where you can launch at a moment's notice if necessary. Trust me, please." There was a long silence. Jack's hand continued working, the gear now 3 millimeters free of its spindle, halfway to removal. "Okay, Dad, I trust you. Whatever is happening, I trust you." Jack felt something break in his chest. 30 years of choosing the mission over his family, 30 years of missed moments and broken promises, and his son still trusted him. Still believed that his father knew what he was doing and would keep him safe. "Thank you, son. I will call you when this is over, I promise." He ended the call before Michael could ask more questions. The gear was now 5 millimeters free. Almost there. Just a little more. His watch alarm beeped. Time for question 3. Jack did not move his hand from the gear. Could not afford to stop now. He was too close. The speaker crackled. Question 3. Jack Dalton. In Berlin, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb was your supervisor. He coached you through the defusal. What was the last thing he said to you before you cut power to my device? Jack's hand continued working, even as his mind raced back to that night. Webb's voice in his ear, calm and steady, a lifeline in the darkness. What had been the last thing Webb said? The gear lifted free. Jack held it suspended, careful not to let it fall, not to let it touch anything that might complete a circuit. He had 30 seconds to answer or the bomb would detonate. He said, "Trust yourself, Dalton. You know what to do. Now do it." Silence from the speaker. 10 seconds. 20. Had Jack been wrong? Was the answer incorrect? His hand held the gear, frozen, waiting. Then Volkov's voice. Correct. Marcus Webb was a good teacher. His death was a waste. A man like that should have died in combat, not in his sleep. But yes, those were his last words to you, and you should listen to them now, Jack. Trust yourself. You know what to do. Jack carefully set the gear aside, away from the devices. The timer continued counting down, but the trigger systems were now isolated. He could see it in the way the circuits had relaxed, the tension gone from the mechanism. 1 hour and 12 minutes remaining. Jack worked quickly now, disabling each trigger system in sequence. The pressure sensors were first, bypassed by redistributing weight across their measurement surfaces. The thermal sensor was next, disabled by disconnecting its circuit before it could register the change in device configuration. The tilt switch was frozen with a precise application of liquid nitrogen, just enough to immobilize the mercury without triggering the thermal sensor's replacement. The mechanical timer was stopped by removing its mainspring, the countdown halting at 57 minutes. Only the dead man's switch remained. The speaker, the camera, the keypad waiting for 2 more questions. Jack sat back, his body aching from the tension of the past 2 hours. 4 of 5 systems disabled. The device could no longer detonate by itself, but Volkov still had control through the dead man's switch. Jack would have to answer the remaining questions or find a way to disable the switch without triggering it. His phone buzzed. Tommy. Success. Device neutralized. All systems disabled. Police are evacuating the warehouse. Master Chief, I did it? I actually did it. Jack felt a wave of relief. Tommy was safe. The New York bomb was stopped. 2 down, 2 to go. He texted back. Outstanding work, Petty Officer. I am proud of you. Now get clear of the area and stand by for further orders. A new text arrived. This one from Colonel Harrison. Jack, we searched Naval EOD School. found a device in the main classroom building, hidden in a storage closet that had been locked and marked for maintenance. Bomb squad is evacuating the building now. You were right. Fourth device confirmed. Senior EOD tech is on site assessing. Jack closed his eyes for a moment. 3 bombs found. 3 bombs being defused or neutralized. Only the one in front of him remained a threat, and it was mostly disabled. They were winning. Against all odds, against a master bomb maker who had never been defeated, they were winning. But the dead man's switch was still active, and Volkov still had 2 questions. Jack opened his eyes, looked at the camera. Alexander, I have disabled 4 of your 5 triggers. The only one left is the dead man's switch. You could detonate now, kill me and everyone on this ship. But you will not, because that is not how you want this to end. You want me to finish. You want me to answer your questions. You want to know if I am still worthy. The speaker crackled. Very perceptive, Jack. You are correct. I will not detonate yet, but you must answer the remaining questions. Not because I need the answers, but because you need to prove you remember, that you have carried Berlin with you all these years, the way I have carried it. We are connected, you and I, by that night, by that device, by the fact that we are the only 2 people in the world who understand what it means to face death and choose to disarm it rather than run from it. Jack stared at the camera. Then ask your question. Question 4. In Berlin, after you defused my device, intelligence officers examined it. They found a message etched inside the mechanism, in Russian. What did the message say? Jack frowned. He had not seen any message. The intelligence officers had taken the device immediately after defusal, had not let him examine it further. He had been debriefed, congratulated, sent back to his unit. He knew nothing about a message. But wait, Chief Webb had mentioned something later, weeks after Berlin. They had been drinking in a bar celebrating the end of their deployment, and Webb had said something strange. Something Jack had dismissed at the time as drunken philosophy, but that suddenly seemed important. Webb had said, the Russians left a message in that bomb, said it was for the man who defused it. Something about respect among warriors. I did not understand it then. Still do not. But maybe someday you will. Jack had asked what the message said, but Webb had been too drunk to remember the exact words. Or had claimed to be. But he had given Jack a hint. Something about chess. Chess, Russian, warriors, respect. And then Jack remembered a phrase from an old Russian novel he had read while studying Soviet culture. A phrase about chess being war without blood, about how the greatest opponents were the ones who made you better by forcing you to think harder, fight smarter, become more than you were. He spoke in Russian, his accent rough but understandable. Dostoyny protivnik delayet nas silneye. A worthy opponent makes us stronger. The speaker was silent for 5 seconds. Then Volkov's voice, and for the first time, there was genuine emotion in it. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. You learned Russian. You prepared for this. All these years, you knew we would face each other again. Jack shook his head. I learned Russian because I wanted to understand you, to think like you, to be ready if you ever came back. And yes, part of me always knew you would. Men like us do not disappear. We finish what we start. Question 5, Jack. The final question. And this one is not about Berlin. This one is about now. Why did you not retire 2 weeks ago when you had the chance? Why did you stay in service until the last possible moment? Jack did not need to think about this answer. He had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. Because I did not know who I was without the mission. Because I was afraid that if I stopped, if I slowed down, I would have to face everything I had sacrificed. My wife, my son, 32 years of choosing duty over family. I stayed because leaving meant admitting that maybe I had been wrong, that maybe the mission was not worth what it cost. And now, do you still believe that? Jack looked at the camera and through it at the man who had been his ghost for 3 decades. No, now I know the mission matters, but it is not more important than the people we are fighting for. My son is on this ship. He is the mission. Saving him, saving these 5,000 sailors, that is what matters. Not proving I am still good enough. Not settling old scores, just making sure they go home to their families. Volkov was silent. Then quietly, that is the correct answer, Jack Dalton. You have passed the test. The dead man's switch is now inactive. You may disable it at your leisure. The device is defeated. You win. Jack did not move. Something in Volkov's tone made him cautious. You are still out there. this is not over. No, it is not over. But this part is finished. You have saved your son. You have saved this ship. You have defeated the 3 devices I meant for you to find. But the 4th device, the one at your EOD school, that one is different. That one is not for you. That one is for the next generation. And I have designed it so that only someone you have trained can defeat it. Your legacy against my legacy, Jack. The student you taught against the final masterpiece of the teacher who never had students. Jack's blood went cold. Who was on site at the school? The speaker crackled with something that might have been laughter. Check your messages, Jack. And hurry, that timer is much shorter than the others. The speaker went dead. Jack grabbed his phone, opened his messages. There was one from Harrison, sent 3 minutes ago. EOD tech on site at the school is Petty Officer Reeves. He arrived before the senior tech and insisted on examining the device. Jack, he found it in the main classroom. Timer shows 30 minutes. Tommy's working on it now. Jack's hands started shaking. Tommy, alone, facing Volkov's masterpiece. The device designed for the next generation meant to test whether Jack's teachings could overcome Volkov's final creation. He grabbed his gear, ran toward the magazine exit. Captain Davis stepped forward, confused. Master Chief, is it safe? Is the device disabled? Yes. Evacuate the area and have your EOD team remove it properly. I need transport to Florida. Now, emergency priority. Jack ran through the carrier's corridors, up ladders, through hatches until he burst onto the flight deck. Michael was there, standing beside his F-18, looking confused and worried. Jack ran to him, grabbed his son's shoulders. Michael, I do not have time to explain everything, but I need you to know that I love you, that I am proud of you, and that I am sorry for every time I was not there. Your mother forgave me. I hope someday you can too. Michael stared at his father, seeing something in the older man's eyes that he had never seen before. Not the stoic warrior, not the distant father, just a man, scared and human, and finally willing to show it. Dad, what is happening? Jack released his son, stepped back. I have to go save someone I trained, someone who is like you were to me. I failed too many people in my life. I am not failing him. He turned, ran toward the helicopter that was spinning up on the deck, blades already turning. Behind him, Michael shouted something, but Jack could not hear it over the rotor noise. He climbed aboard, and the helicopter lifted off, banking away from the carrier, racing toward Florida. Tommy had 30 minutes, maybe less. Volkov's final device was waiting, and Jack was 300 miles away, helpless to do anything except hope that his training had been good enough. 32 years of teaching, hundreds of students, thousands of lessons, all of it came down to this: one young petty officer facing one final bomb, with nothing but his training and his courage to see him through. Jack closed his eyes and prayed. For the second time in his life, he prayed, not for himself, for Tommy, for the kid who had looked up to him, who had trusted him, who had believed that old Jack Dalton knew what he was doing. The helicopter flew south through the afternoon sky, and somewhere in Florida, a timer counted down toward 0. The helicopter screamed across the sky, engines pushed beyond their rated limits, every bolt and rivet vibrating with the strain of maximum speed. Jack Dalton sat in the crew bay, headset on, phone in one hand, the other gripping the edge of his seat hard enough that his knuckles had gone white. Below, the landscape blurred past, Virginia coastline giving way to North Carolina pine forests, then Georgia wetlands. 300 miles to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. At this speed, 28 minutes. Tommy had 30 minutes on the timer when Harrison had sent the message, which meant Tommy now had maybe 25 minutes. Maybe less, if Volkov had lied about the countdown, if the device was set to detonate early, if any of 1,000 variables that Jack could not control went wrong. 25 minutes for Jack to cover 300 miles and somehow save a young sailor who was facing the most sophisticated bomb a master craftsman had ever built. It was impossible. Jack had spent 32 years doing impossible things. His phone rang. Tommy, calling on the encrypted tactical line. Jack answered immediately, his voice steady despite the fear that lived in his chest like a physical weight. Tommy, report. Master Chief, I found the device. Main classroom building, storage closet on the 2nd floor. It is bigger than the others, more complex. I have never seen anything like this. Sir, I do not know if I can do this. Tommy's voice carried the edge of panic, the sound of a young man realizing he was in over his head, facing something that his training had not fully prepared him for. Jack recognized That edge because he had heard it in his own voice 35 years ago, in Berlin, when Chief Webb had told him to handle the impossible. Tommy, listen to me. You can do this. I trained you. I would not have sent you to New York if I did not believe you were capable. You defeated that device. This one is just another puzzle. Harder, yes, but still solvable. Sir, the timer shows 23 minutes, and there are 7 trigger systems. 7, I counted them twice to be sure. Mechanical timer, 3 pressure sensors, 2 tilt switches, and something I have never seen before. Some kind of acoustic sensor, I think. It might be monitoring sound levels, voice patterns. I do not know. Jack's mind raced. 7 systems. Volkov's previous devices had never exceeded 5. This was his masterpiece, his final statement, built with every technique he had perfected over decades. And an acoustic sensor was new, sophisticated, the kind of innovation that came from a dying man who wanted to prove he still had surprises left. Okay, 7 systems. That is manageable. Break it down into components. Map everything before you touch anything. Do you have time to X-ray it? Negative, sir. X-ray equipment is still being transported from the main base. I have visual only and a portable scanner that is showing me circuit signatures but not full detail. Then work with what you have. Tommy, I need you to send me video, live feed from your phone. Position it so I can see the device clearly. I will talk you through this. Sir, you are still in the air. How can you guide me when you cannot be here? Because I know how Volkov thinks, and because you know how I think. Together we are smarter than he is. Now send me that video feed. There was a pause. Then Tommy's voice, steadier now, the panic receding as training and discipline took over. Roger that, Master Chief. Video feed incoming. Jack's phone screen split, showing the helicopter's GPS tracking on one side, Tommy's camera feed on the other. The image stabilized, showing a device that made Jack's breath catch despite decades of experience. It was a work of art, not metaphorically, literally. Volkov had arranged the explosives and mechanisms in a pattern that was aesthetically pleasing, almost sculptural. The semtex was molded into flowing curves that suggested movement, power barely contained. The trigger systems were positioned with geometric precision, brass and steel gleaming under the classroom lights. And at the center, the mechanical timer, larger than the others, with gears visible through crystal clear casing. The timer showed 21 minutes, 38 seconds. Jack studied the image, his trained eye cataloging every detail, every wire, every connection. The acoustic sensor Tommy had mentioned was visible now, a small microphone positioned near the timer, probably monitoring for specific sound patterns or sudden noises that might indicate tampering. Tommy, the acoustic sensor, do not make any sudden loud noises. Work quietly, speak in a normal conversational tone. Volkov designed it to trigger on unexpected sounds, things that would indicate someone was trying to breach the device with power tools or explosives. Copy that, sir. What about the pressure sensors? There are 3 of them, 1 under the device, 2 on the sides. Jack zoomed in on the image with his fingers, examining the sensor placements. Classic Volkov. Multiple redundancy, but arranged in a pattern that created a vulnerability if you understood the geometry. The sensors are triangulated. They are measuring weight distribution across 3 points. If you remove weight from any one point, the others will detect the imbalance and trigger detonation. But if you add weight evenly across all 3 points, you can create a new stable equilibrium. Do you have anything heavy you can use? Tommy panned the camera, showing the classroom around him. Standard EOD training equipment, dummy devices, toolkits, reference manuals, and on a shelf, textbooks, heavy technical manuals, dozens of them. I have books, sir. Will those work? Perfect. Start stacking them around the device, evenly distributed. Build up weight gradually so the sensors adjust slowly. Make it think the weight is increasing naturally, not from tampering. Roger, beginning now. Jack watched the video feed as Tommy's hands appeared in frame, carefully placing books around the device. Textbooks on explosive ordnance disposal, ironically. Jack recognized some of the titles. He had written chapters in 2 of those books, his knowledge preserved in pages that were now being used to defeat a bomb. The helicopter crossed into Florida airspace. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Master Chief, Eglin is 17 minutes out. We are pushing the engines as hard as we can, but physics is physics. I cannot make this bird go faster without tearing it apart. Jack keyed his mic. Understood. Just get me there. He returned his attention to the phone. Tommy was still placing books, building a careful pyramid of weight around the device. Smart kid, methodical, not rushing despite the timer counting down. 18 minutes, 42 seconds remaining. Master Chief, I have 30 pounds distributed around the device. The pressure sensors have not triggered. I think it is working. Good. Now we address the tilt switches. Tell me about them. Positions, angles, anything that seems unusual. Tommy adjusted the camera, zooming in on the tilt switches. They were mounted on opposite sides of the device, mercury gleaming silver in glass tubes. But unlike standard tilt switches, these had additional components. Small motors attached to the mounting brackets. Sir, these tilt switches have servos. I think they are motorized. They might be adjusting position automatically to compensate for any movement. Jack had never seen that before. Active tilt switches that could reposition themselves. That was sophisticated beyond anything Volkov had done previously. A dying man's final innovation. The kind of advancement that came from having nothing to lose and everything to prove. If they are motorized, they are getting power from somewhere. Trace the power wires, find the source. We might be able to cut power without triggering the switches. Tommy moved the camera, following wires from the tilt switches back through the device's circuitry. The wires ran through a junction box, then split into multiple paths. Some went to the timer, some went to the pressure sensors, and some went to a small battery pack hidden behind the Semtex. Found the power source, sir, but it is feeding all the systems. If I cut it, everything goes down at once. That might trigger cascade failures. Jack thought fast. Volkov would have anticipated someone finding the power source, would have made cutting it either impossible or fatal. Unless there was a specific sequence, a way to power down the systems in an order that prevented cascade. Tommy, look at the junction box where the wires split. Are there any markings? Numbers? Letters? Anything? Tommy zoomed in on this junction box. It was brass, engraved with intricate designs that seemed decorative at first. But as Jack studied them, he realized they were not decorations. They were Cyrillic letters. Russian. Sir, there is text. Russian. I cannot read it. Jack could. He had spent years studying Russian specifically to understand Volkov. The text read, Sequentia est clavis. Sequence is the key. Tommy, Volkov is telling us there is a specific sequence to disable the systems. The order matters. If we shut them down in the wrong order, cascade failure. In the right order, clean shutdown. But what is the sequence? How do we figure it out? Jack stared at the video feed, at the device that represented a lifetime of craftsmanship in a dying man's final message. Volkov respected intelligence, respected those who could think past the obvious. He would not have made the sequence random. There would be a pattern, something that connected to his history, his philosophy, his understanding of what made a worthy opponent. 7 systems. 7 was significant in many cultures, but Jack doubted Volkov cared about mysticism. No, 7 was significant because it was the number of systems, which meant the sequence was about the systems themselves, their nature, their purpose. Jack thought about the Volkov devices he had studied. They always had a hierarchy. Primary systems that controlled the detonation, secondary systems that prevented tampering, and always, hidden somewhere, the vulnerability that allowed a worthy opponent to win. Tommy, map the systems for me. Tell me which ones are connected directly to the detonator and which ones are monitoring systems. Tommy worked quickly, tracing wires, identifying connections. His voice was steady now, focused, the kind of concentration that came when training overrode fear. Okay, sir, the mechanical timer is primary. It is connected directly to the main detonator. The acoustic sensor is also primary, hardwired to a secondary detonator. Everything else, the pressure sensors, tilt switches, those are monitoring systems. They feed into a control circuit that can override the timer and trigger early detonation. Jack understood. The sequence was not random, it was logical. Disable the monitoring systems first, from least critical to most critical. Then, and only then, address the primary systems. Here is the sequence, Tommy. Listen carefully. First, disable the pressure sensors. They are the least sensitive, the easiest to trick. We have already stabilized them with the books. Second, disable the tilt switches. Cut power to the servos. Freeze the mercury with liquid nitrogen. Third, disable the acoustic sensor. That will require getting it to accept normal ambient sound as the baseline, then carefully muting yourself as you work. Fourth, stop the mechanical timer. And finally, remove the detonators themselves. Sir, that is 5 steps. What about the other 2 systems? Jack frowned, looking closer at the video feed. Tommy had said 7 systems. Timer, acoustic sensor, 3 pressure sensors, 2 tilt switches. That was 7. But Jack had described 5 steps because he was grouping the 3 pressure sensors as 1 step and the 2 tilt switches as another. Unless there were actually more than 7 components, but only 7 systems. Unless Volkov had hidden something. Tommy, scan the entire device again. Look for anything that does not fit the visible systems. Hidden wires, unusual components, anything that seems out of place. Tommy moved the camera slowly across the device. At first, nothing unusual. Then, barely visible in a shadow cast by the timer housing. A small lens. A camera. Sir, there is a camera, just like the one on the Reagan device. Volkov is watching. And if he is watching, he can trigger remotely. That is system number 8, not 7. Tommy, check for wireless receivers. Cellular, radio, anything that could receive a remote detonation signal. Tommy found it within seconds. A small module tucked beneath the timer, connected to an antenna that ran through the device like a nervous system. Found it. Cellular receiver active. He could trigger this anytime he wants, except he will not. Because if he wanted us dead, he would have triggered it already. He wants to see if we can beat it, but we need to disable that receiver before we do anything else. It is the real primary system. Everything else is secondary. How do I disable it without triggering the bomb? Jack thought about the Reagan device. He had wrapped the receiver in aluminum foil, creating a Faraday cage that blocks signals. Simple, effective. But Volkov had seen that technique, would have adapted. The receiver on this device probably had anti-jamming features, maybe even a circuit that would trigger detonation if signal was lost. Unless there was another way. Unless instead of blocking the signal, they could fake it. Make the receiver think it was still connected to Volkov when it was actually isolated. Tommy, do you have access to a radio transmitter? Something that can broadcast on cellular frequencies? Negative, sir. Not in this classroom. The equipment is all basic training gear. Jack cursed silently. Without the ability to spoof the receiver, they would have to risk blocking it and hope Volkov had not built in a dead man's switch. 13 minutes, 18 seconds on the timer. The helicopter was descending now, approaching Eglin. Jack could see the base below, massive and sprawling. Runways and buildings and training grounds. Somewhere down there, Tommy was fighting the clock. Okay, new plan. We disable everything except the receiver. We save that for last. When I am on the ground, when I am there with you, we will handle it together. Can you work the other systems while I am still in transit? Sir, you will be here in what, 13 minutes? The bomb goes off in 13 minutes. Then we work fast. And we trust that Volkov wants to see this play out more than he wants to trigger it early. Tommy, start with the pressure sensors. You have the books in place. Now you need to lock them in that position. Do you have epoxy or quickset adhesive? Yes, sir, in my kit. Apply it around the base of each sensor. Create a solid foundation so even if weight shifts, the sensors do not move. Work quickly but carefully. You have 5 minutes for this step. Roger, beginning now. Jack watched the video feed as Tommy's hands worked with practiced efficiency. The kid had learned well. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, no wasted motion. This was what 3 decades of training produced. Not fearless warriors who never doubted, but competent and professionals who could function despite fear, who could think clearly when everything in them screamed to run. The helicopter touched down at Eglin. Jack was moving before the skids fully settled, jumping out with his gear bag, running toward a waiting jeep where a base security officer stood ready. Where? Jack shouted over the rotor noise. Building 7, second floor, main classroom. I will drive. Get in. They raced across the base, siren wailing, other vehicles pulling aside to let them pass. Jack kept his eyes on his phone screen, watching Tommy work. The epoxy was setting around the pressure sensors. Good. That system was neutralized. 11 minutes, 47 seconds. Tommy, status. Pressure sensors are locked down. Moving to tilt switches now. Applying liquid nitrogen to freeze the mercury. Good. Remember, freeze them in place, but do not let the temperature drop so fast that the thermal sensors, if any exist, pick it up. Slow and steady. Roger. The Jeep skidded to the stop outside Building 7. Jack was out and running before the vehicle stopped moving, taking stairs 3 at a time, his 54-year-old legs protesting but obeying, his lungs burning but still pushing air. Second floor, main classroom, door open. Tommy was kneeling beside the device, nitrogen canister in hand, carefully applying freezing liquid to the first tilt switch. The young petty officer did not look up when Jack entered, staying focused on the work. Professional, disciplined, everything Jack had taught him. Jack knelt beside him, set down his gear bag. "I am here, son. We finished this together." Tommy's hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. "Good to have you here, Master Chief. This thing is a monster. It is Volkov's masterpiece, his final statement. But we are going to beat it. How much time? 9 minutes, 31 seconds. Jack pulled out his tools, examined the device in person. The video feed had not done it justice. Up close, the craftsmanship was staggering. Every wire perfectly placed, every component positioned with geometric precision. This was not just a bomb. This was a legacy, a physical representation of a lifetime spent perfecting the art of destruction. But Jack had spent a lifetime perfecting the art of prevention, and he was not about to let Volkov win. The tilt switches were frozen now, mercury solid, unable to flow. Tommy had done good work. The switches were effectively disabled. That left the acoustic sensor, the timer, the receiver, and the detonators. 4 systems, 9 minutes. Jack focused on the acoustic sensor. The microphone was monitoring ambient sound, probably measuring decibel levels and frequency patterns. Any sudden change, any sound that indicated drilling or cutting or prying, would trigger detonation. But there was a vulnerability in any sound-based trigger. It had to establish a baseline, had to understand what normal sounded like before it could recognize abnormal. Jack spoke in a normal, conversational tone, steady and calm. "Tommy, we are going to have a conversation. We are going to talk like 2 people discussing something mundane. And while we talk, I am going to very slowly, very carefully, disconnect the acoustic sensor's power wire. The sensor will hear our voices and interpret them as normal background sound. When the power goes, it will not trigger because it will think it simply stopped receiving input, not that it was tampered with." "What should we talk about, sir?" Jack smiled slightly, his hands beginning to work on the device. "Tell me why you joined EOD. What made you choose this life?" Tommy kept his eyes on the device, but his voice relaxed into the rhythm of normal speech. "My uncle was a bomb tech. He served in Iraq, early 2000s. I grew up hearing his stories. He made it sound like the most important job in the military, protecting people by taking apart the things meant to kill them. I wanted to be like him." "Is he still serving?" "He died 3 years ago. Training accident. A device he was examining malfunctioned. It should not have happened, but it did. And I decided that day that I would carry on his work, make sure his knowledge did not die with him." Jack's hands continued working, tracing the power wire, following it back to its source. "That is a good reason. Legacy matters. The knowledge we pass on, the students we train, that is how we become immortal. Not through our own deeds, but through what we teach others." "Is that why you stayed in so long, sir? To pass on what you know?" Jack carefully loosened a connection, his fingers steady despite the timer counting down. 7 minutes, 12 seconds. Partly, but also because I did not know who I was without the uniform, without the mission. I am learning now, at the end of my career, that there is more to life than the job. But it took me too long to figure that out. The power wire came free in Jack's hand. The acoustic sensor went dark. No explosion. The device continued ticking, unaware that another one of its defenses had been defeated. 5 systems down, 3 remaining, 7 minutes. Jack turned his attention to the cellular receiver. This was the dangerous one. Volkov's remote trigger, the fail-safe that would let him detonate if he decided the battle was lost. Wrapping it in foil had worked on the Reagan, but Volkov would have adapted. This receiver would be smarter. Jack pulled out his portable frequency scanner, examined the receiver's signal patterns. It was transmitting a heartbeat, a regular pulse that let Volkov know the device was active. If that heartbeat stopped, if the signal was blocked or jammed, it would probably trigger. But there was another option. If Jack could capture the heartbeat pattern and replicate it, he could disconnect the receiver while making Volkov think it was still active. The same technique he had used on the Reagan, but more sophisticated. He pulled out a signal generator from his kit, configured it to match the receiver's frequency, and pulse pattern. This would take precision. The signal had to match exactly, or Volkov would know something was wrong. Tommy watched, understanding what Jack was doing without needing explanation. "That is brilliant, sir. You are making him think nothing has changed while we pull his teeth. That is how you beat an opponent who thinks he is smarter than you. You let him keep thinking it until it is too late." Jack activated the signal generator. The device began broadcasting a false heartbeat, identical to the receiver's original signal. Then, working with surgical precision, Jack disconnected the receiver's antenna. The receiver went silent, but Volkov's monitoring equipment would still be receiving the heartbeat from Jack's generator. As far as Volkov knew, the bomb was still active, still under his control. 6 systems down, 2 remaining, 5 minutes, 43 seconds. The mechanical timer was next. Brass gears turning behind crystal casing, counting down with the inevitability of time itself. Jack studied the mechanism, remembering the 47 tooth gear from the Reagan device. Volkov liked to hide his solutions in plain sight, to make them visible to anyone who understood how to look. The gears in this device were more complex, more numerous, but there in the center was a gear with an unusual number of teeth. Jack counted them, 52. The number of people Volkov had killed across his career, including the 47 from before and the 5 on the Reagan who would have died if Jack had failed. Volkov was documenting his body count in his own work, a signature written in brass and mathematics. Jack traced the 52 tooth gears connections. It meshed with 6 other gears, each connected to one of the other trigger systems. The 7th connection went to the detonator itself. If Jack could remove this gear, he could isolate the timer from the detonation circuit. But the gear was under tension from the mainspring. Removing it without releasing that tension would be like removing a keystone from an arch. Everything would collapse at once, unless he could transfer the tension elsewhere. If he could install a replacement gear, something that would hold the tension while he removed the real gear, he could safely disconnect the system. Jack dug through his kit. Did he have anything that could serve as a temporary replacement? His fingers found a metal cylinder, part of a spare mechanism from another defusal months ago. It was approximately the right size, the right shape. He positioned the cylinder carefully, using it to brace the mainspring's tension. Then, working with hands that no longer shook despite the countdown, he began to lift the 52 tooth gear free. 3 minutes, 18 seconds. Tommy held his breath. Jack did not. Breath control was essential. Steady breathing kept the hands steady. He had learned that from Chief Webb 35 years ago. The gear came free. The cylinder held the tension. The timer continued running, but it was no longer connected to anything. Just gears turning in isolation, counting down to a detonation that would never come. 7 systems down, 1 remaining, 3 minutes, 6 seconds. The detonators, the final component, the actual explosives that would, if triggered, turn 200 pounds of Semtex into a fireball that would obliterate the building and everyone in it. Jack examined them. There were 3, positioned around the device in a triangular pattern. Each one was connected to the now isolated timer, to the now disabled receiver, to the now neutralized trigger systems. But the connections were live. Cutting them wrong would complete a circuit, trigger the explosion. He needed to disconnect all 3 simultaneously. No, not simultaneously, sequentially, but in the right order. Volkov would have built in one last trap, one final test. Jack studied the detonators. They were identical in appearance, but the wires connecting them were different colors. Red, blue, yellow. The same 3 colors from Berlin. The same choice Jack had faced 35 years ago. And just like Berlin, the obvious solution would be wrong. Jack had learned then that all 3 wires were part of the same circuit, that cutting anyone would trigger detonation. The real power wire had been gray, hidden beneath the housing. He looked for the gray wire, found it running beneath the detonator housing, barely visible. That was the one. That was the wire that actually carried current to the detonators. 2 minutes, 47 seconds. Jack positioned his wire cutters. Tommy watched, understanding that this was the moment everything hinged on. If Jack was right, they would live. If he was wrong, they would not even have time to know they had failed. Jack cut the gray wire. The device went silent. The timer stopped at 2 minutes, 34 seconds. The detonators powered down. The entire mechanism, this masterpiece of engineering and malice, became inert. Jack sat back, exhausted. Tommy let out a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. We did it. Master Chief, we actually did it. No, son, you did it. I just helped. You faced Volkov's masterpiece and you beat it. That is your victory. Own it. Tommy looked at Jack and the young man's eyes were wet. Thank you, sir, for training me, for believing in me, for coming here. Jack put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. That is what teachers do. We give our students the tools they need, then trust them to use those tools when it matters. You proved today that my trust was well placed. The moment was interrupted by Jack's phone ringing. Colonel Harrison. Jack, tell me you stopped it. Device is neutralized, sir. Building is secure, no casualties. There was a sound on the other end that might have been relief or gratitude or both. Outstanding work, Master Chief. Both of you. The FBI is tracking Volkov now. We have a lead on his location. Norfolk area based on the cellular signals from his receiver monitoring equipment. SWAT teams are moving to intercept. Jack stood up, his body protesting, every one of his 54 years making itself known. We are coming with them. Volkov and I need to finish this face-to-face. Jack, you have done enough. Let the FBI handle the arrest. No, sir. This started in Berlin with Volkov and me. It ends the same way. I am going to look him in the eye when he is arrested. I am going to be there when he realizes he lost. Harrison was silent for a moment, then quietly, understood. Transport is being arranged. You will link up with the FBI team in Norfolk within the hour. Jack ended the call, looked at Tommy. You are coming with me. Sir, I should stay here. Process the device. Document everything for the investigation. This is your investigation too. You earned the right to see it through to the end. Besides, I might need backup. I am too old to arrest a Soviet bomb maker by myself. Tommy grinned despite the exhaustion. Then let us go catch a ghost, Master Chief. They walked out of the classroom, leaving the disarmed device behind. Outside, the Florida sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Jack looked up at it, feeling something he had not felt in a long time. Not relief exactly, not victory, but something close to peace. 4 bombs, 4 defusals, hundreds of lives saved, and most importantly, Tommy and Michael both alive, both safe. Now there was only one thing left to do. Face the man who had been his ghost for 3 decades. Finish the game that had started in Berlin and had haunted him through his entire career. Alexander Volkov was waiting, and Jack Dalton was coming to settle the score. The FBI tactical van raced through the Virginia night, headlights cutting through darkness like searchlights hunting prey. Jack Dalton sat in the back, body armor strapped over his uniform, Tommy beside him wearing the same gear. Around them, 6 FBI hostage rescue team operators checked weapons and reviewed the tactical plan. The air smelled of gun oil and tension. Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, the FBI's lead coordinator on the Volkov case, sat across from Jack, a tablet in her hands showing satellite imagery of the target location. A warehouse in the Norfolk Industrial District, abandoned for years, now confirmed as Volkov's operational base through cellular signal triangulation and thermal imaging that showed a single heat signature inside. She looked at Jack, her expression skeptical. Master Chief, I understand you want to be here when we take him down, but you are not a federal agent. You are not trained for tactical raids. I need you to stay in the van when we go in. Jack met her eyes, his voice calm but carrying the weight of 3 decades of authority. Agent Mitchell, I have been kicking down doors since before you were born. I have conducted operations in 12 countries under conditions that would make your HRT operators quit. I am going in. The only question is whether you try to stop me and waste time we do not have, or you accept it and we move forward together. Mitchell held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded. Fine, but you follow our lead, our protocols. If I tell you to hold position, you hold. Clear? Crystal. The van slowed, pulling into a staging area 2 blocks from the warehouse. The team piled out, moving with practiced efficiency, spreading into tactical formation. Jack and Tommy fell in at the rear, close enough to be part of the operation, but positioned where they would not interfere with the professionals doing their job. The warehouse loomed ahead, 3 stories of rusted metal and broken windows, a relic from Norfolk's industrial past now serving as the final hideout for a Soviet ghost who had terrorized 3 continents. Floodlights from nearby docks cast long shadows across the pavement. The building looked empty, dead, but thermal imaging did not lie. Volkov was inside. Mitchell raised her fist, halting the team. She keyed her radio, speaking in the clipped, professional tone of tactical operations. All units, this is Alpha 1. Target is confirmed inside, 3rd floor, northeast corner. We go on my mark. Rules of engagement are capture if possible, neutralize if necessary. Suspect is considered extremely dangerous. Do not underestimate him. The team moved forward, silent as shadows, approaching the warehouse from 3 sides simultaneously. Jack followed, his old training reasserting itself, his body remembering how to move in tactical situations despite years of focusing on bombs rather than raids. They breached through a service entrance, clearing rooms with precision, moving up stairwells with overlapping fields of fire. The warehouse interior was vast and empty, equipment long since removed, only dust and decay remaining. The team's flashlights cut through the darkness, searching for threats, finding nothing. 3rd floor. The thermal signature was stronger now, just ahead, behind a metal door marked with Cyrillic letters that Jack recognized. Laboratory. This had been some kind of Soviet-era facility, possibly a front company, or intelligence operation during the Cold War. Fitting that Volkov would return to his roots for his final stand. Mitchell positioned her team around the door, operators ready to breach. She looked at Jack, nodded. Last chance to stay back, Master Chief. Jack shook his head. I am seeing this through. Mitchell counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward, breaching charge, blowing it off its hinges. Operators flooded through, weapons raised, voices shouting. Federal agents, show your hands. Get on the ground. Do not move. Jack followed them through the smoke, his eyes adjusting to the room beyond. It was set up like a workshop, benches covered with tools and components, diagrams pinned to walls showing bomb designs that Jack recognized from intelligence briefings spanning decades. And at the center of it all, sitting calmly at a desk with a laptop open in front of him, was Alexander Volkov. He looked older than the intelligence photos Jack had studied. 68 years old now, hair completely white, face lined with age and illness. He wore a simple gray sweater, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, and despite the weapons pointed at him from 6 directions, he appeared completely relaxed, calm, as if FBI operators breaching his hideout was the most natural thing in the world. Volkov raised his hands slowly, deliberately, showing they were empty. Then he spoke, his English accented but clear, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had nothing left to fear. Good evening, gentlemen. And lady, Agent Mitchell, I presume? I have been expecting you. Please lower your weapons. I am not armed. I have no intention of resisting arrest. I am dying of pancreatic cancer. I have perhaps 3 months left. Spending them in an American prison is acceptable. Mitchell kept her weapon trained on him. Alexander Volkov, you are under arrest for terrorism, murder, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Volkov waved a hand dismissively. Yes, I know my rights. I studied American law extensively when planning this operation. But before you take me into custody, I wish to speak with Master Chief Jack Dalton. That is why I allowed you to find me. That is why I did not fight. Because the real conclusion to this story requires a conversation between 2 old warriors who understand each other better than anyone else could. He looked past the operators directly at Jack. Hello, Jack. It has been a long time since Berlin. You look good. Age has treated you well. Jack stepped forward, ignoring Mitchell's warning hand on his shoulder. He moved until he was face to face with Volkov, close enough to see the intelligence and sickness in the old man's eyes. Alexander, you killed 52 people. You tried to kill thousands more. Why, what was the point of all this? Volkov smiled, a sad expression that held no joy. Legacy, Jack. You of all people should understand. We spend our lives perfecting our crafts. You learn to save lives, I learned to take them. But when death comes for us, as it comes for all men eventually, what remains? Our work, our teachings, the knowledge we pass to the next generation. I wanted to prove that Soviet engineering, Soviet thinking, Soviet discipline could challenge the greatest American EOD specialist who ever lived. And you know what? I succeeded. You defeated my devices, yes, but you will remember them forever. You will teach about them. Students will study them for decades. That is legacy. Jack stared at the man who had haunted him for 35 years, a dying engineer seeking immortality through destruction. It was pathetic and profound at the same time. You are wrong. Legacy is not about how many people remember you. It is about what you leave behind. I trained Tommy Reeves. He defeated your masterpiece today, your final device, the one you thought could not be beaten. That is my legacy, a young man who learned from me and proved he could face the impossible. What is your legacy, Alexander? Fear? Death? That is not immortality. That is just waste. Volkov's smile faded. He looked at Tommy, standing behind Jack, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps? Or regret? Petty Officer Reeves, you defeated my best work. That device was designed to be unbeatable. How did you do it? Tommy stepped forward, and Jack was proud to see no fear in the young man's face. Just confidence and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. I thought like you. Master Chief Dalton taught me that every bomb maker has patterns, tells, weaknesses hidden in their strengths. You were arrogant enough to make your devices beautiful, to show your work. That beauty revealed the structure, and once I understood the structure, I understood how to take it apart. Volkov nodded slowly. Arrogance. Yes, that has always been my weakness. The need to demonstrate superiority, to prove I was the best. And in proving it, I gave you the tools to defeat me. Ironic. Mitchell stepped forward, her patience exhausted. Enough philosophy. Volkov, you are coming with us. Now. Two operators moved to handcuff Volkov. The old man stood slowly, wincing slightly from pain that was probably the cancer eating him from inside. He allowed himself to be cuffed without resistance, his dignity intact despite the circumstances. As they led him toward the door, Volkov stopped, looked back at Jack one last time. Jack Dalton, when I am gone, when I have died in your American prison, I want you to know something. You were worthy. In Berlin, you earned my respect. Today, you earned my admiration. There are few men in this world who understand what we do, who appreciate the art and science of our crafts. We are brothers, you and I, brothers who chose different paths, but brothers nonetheless. I hope you find peace in your retirement. You have earned it. Jack said nothing. There was nothing to say. Volkov was right and wrong at the same time. They did understand each other, but that understanding did not create kinship. It created only the awareness that they had spent their lives on opposite sides of an eternal war between those who protected and those who destroyed. They led Volkov away. The warehouse fell silent except for FBI and forensic teams beginning to process the scene, documenting everything, cataloging evidence that would ensure Volkov spent what remained of his life in a supermax prison cell. Jack stood in the empty workshop, looking at the diagrams on the walls, the tools on the benches, the physical evidence of a lifetime spent perfecting death. And he thought about his own workshop, his own tools, his own diagrams. Not so different, really, just pointed in the opposite direction. Tommy appeared beside him. Sir, are you okay? Jack nodded slowly. I am. For the first time in a long time, I actually am. They walked out of the warehouse together. Master and student, teacher and successor. Outside, dawn was breaking over Norfolk, the sky turning from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning. Jack looked up at it, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weight of 3 decades begin to lift from his shoulders. His phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Dad, I heard what happened. Are you safe? Can we talk? Jack smiled, typed a response. I am safe, and yes, we should talk. I owe you that, and so much more. I am coming to see you. Today. No mission, no emergency, just a father visiting his son. The response came within seconds. I would like that, Dad. I really would. Jack pocketed his phone, looked at Tommy. Take the rest of the day off, petty officer. You earned it. Hell, take the rest of the week. You saved hundreds of lives today. The Navy owes you time to process that. What about you, sir? What are you going to do? Jack smiled. I am going to visit my son. Then I am going to retire. Actually retire this time. 2 weeks turned into the longest 2 weeks of my life. But it is over now. Time to let the next generation take over. You are really done? No more missions? No more bombs? Really done. My time is finished. But yours is just beginning. You have 20 or 30 more years ahead of you. Learn from every device you face. Train the techs who come after you. Pass on what you know. That is how we win. Not by being immortal, but by making sure our knowledge survives us. Tommy nodded, understanding settling into his expression. I will, sir. I promise. They shook hands, the formal military gesture becoming something more personal, more meaningful. a bond between warriors who had faced death together and survived. Jack walked away toward the waiting transportation that would take him back to the carrier, back to his son, back to the life he had neglected for too long in pursuit of the mission. 3 days later, Jack stood on the parade ground at Naval Base Coronado, wearing his dress whites, medals gleaming in the California sun. The retirement ceremony was smaller than protocol suggested for someone of his rank and experience. Jack had requested it that way. No fuss, no grand speeches, just the essential personnel and the people who mattered. Captain Davis from the Reagan was there, Commander Mitchell from the FBI, Colonel Harrison, who had flown in from Washington specifically for this moment, and Tommy Reeves, standing at attention in his dress uniform, pride visible on his young face. But the person Jack's eyes kept returning to was Michael, standing in the front row in his navy dress blues, pilot's wings gleaming above his ribbons. His son had taken leave to attend the ceremony, had flown cross-country to be here. That meant more to Jack than all the medals on his chest combined. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. The reading of orders, the presentation of the retirement certificate, the formal transfer of responsibility to the next generation of EOD specialists. And then Colonel Harrison stepped forward to deliver the remarks. Master Chief Petty Officer Jack Dalton has served this nation for 32 years with distinction, courage, and unwavering dedication. He has defused more explosive devices than any other technician in naval history. He has trained hundreds of EOD specialists, many of whom credit their lives to his teachings. And in his final mission, facing the most sophisticated terrorist threat this nation has seen in a generation, he proved that experience and wisdom are the greatest weapons we possess. Harrison paused, looking directly at Jack. But beyond the statistics, beyond the missions and the medals, Jack Dalton represents something essential to our military culture. He represents the men and women who serve not for glory or recognition, but because the mission matters, because protecting others matters, because sacrifice, true sacrifice, not about dying for your country, it is about living for it, spending every day, every hour in service to something larger than yourself. Jack felt something tight in his chest. Harrison was not just reading prepared remarks, he meant every word. Master Chief Dalton, on behalf of the United States Navy, the Department of Defense, and a grateful nation, I present you with the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in the face of extreme danger. Your actions saved thousands of lives and prevented a catastrophic terrorist attack on American soil. You have earned the respect and admiration of everyone who wears the uniform. Thank you for your service. May your retirement bring you the peace and happiness you have more than earned. Harrison pinned the Navy Cross to Jack's uniform, saluted and stepped back. The assembled personnel saluted in unison. Jack returned the salute, his hand steady, his eyes clear despite the emotion he felt. Then it was over. The orders were read, declaring him retired. The flag was folded and presented to him. And Jack Dalton, Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician, became a civilian for the first time in 32 years. The crowd dispersed. Harrison shook his hand, promised to stay in touch. Mitchell congratulated him, said the FBI would probably want to consult with him on Volkov's interrogation. Tommy gave him a fierce hug that was entirely inappropriate for military protocol and entirely perfect for the moment. And then it was just Jack and Michael, standing alone on the parade ground, father and son, the silence between them carrying years of distance and pain and missed opportunities. Michael spoke first. Dad, I am proud of you. I know I have not said that enough, maybe never said it at all, but I am. What you did, stopping those bombs, saving all those people, Mom would be proud too. Jack felt tears threaten, held them back through decades of practiced discipline. Your mother was proud of you, Michael. She talked about you every day, your accomplishments, your potential. She knew you would become a fine officer and a better man than I ever was. Michael shook his head. You are wrong about that. You are exactly the man I want to be. I just wish I had understood that sooner. Wish I had not wasted so much time being angry. You had every right to be angry. I chose the mission over you and your mother more times than I can count. I missed birthdays, holidays, moments that mattered. I told myself it was necessary, that the work was too important. But the truth is I was afraid of being a father, afraid of failing at something I could not fix with technical skill and training. It was easier to defuse bombs than to face my own shortcomings as a parent. Michael stepped forward, put his hand on Jack's shoulder. But you are facing them now, and that takes more courage than any mission. Dad, I forgive you for all of it, and I hope we can start over, build the relationship we should have had all along. Jack pulled his son into an embrace, no longer able to hold back the emotion. They stood there on the parade ground, two Navy officers holding each other, letting go of years of hurt and regret. I would like that, son. I would like that very much. They separated, both wiping their eyes, both smiling despite the tears. Michael gestured toward the parking lot where his rental car waited. I took a week of leave, thought maybe we could spend some time together. Do things fathers and sons do. Go fishing, maybe, or just talk. Make up for lost time. Jack nodded. I would like to go fishing. I have not done that since I was a boy. My father took me before he shipped out to Vietnam. I never saw him again after that trip. Maybe it is time to create better memories. They walked toward the car together, and Jack felt something he had not felt in 3 decades. Hope. Not hope that the next mission would succeed, not hope that he would survive another defusal, but hope that the future could be different from the past. That retirement was not an ending, but a beginning. 6 months later, Jack stood in a classroom at the Naval EOD School at Heartland Air Force Base, facing 30 young sailors who represented the next generation of bomb technicians. He was not in uniform anymore. Those days were over, but he wore the Navy windbreaker and khakis of a civilian instructor, and the students looked at him with the kind of respect usually reserved for legends. Tommy Reeves stood at the back of the classroom, now a chief petty officer himself, promoted early for his actions against Volkov's devices. He was officially the assistant instructor for this course, but everyone knew he was really there to make sure Jack did not go off script. The Navy had given Jack freedom to teach, but they wanted someone to make sure he did not traumatize the new recruits with stories that were too intense. Jack clicked to the next slide in his presentation, showing a photograph of Volkov's final device, the masterpiece that Tommy had defeated. This device was built by Alexander Volkov, the most skilled bomb maker the modern world has seen. He spent 4 decades perfecting his craft. He killed 52 people before we stopped him. And every one of those deaths taught him something new, made him better, more dangerous. By the time he built this final device, he had incorporated everything he had learned across his entire career. A young sailor raised her hand. Sir, how did Chief Reeves defeat it? The technical brief said there were 7 trigger systems. Jack smiled. The same way I defeated Volkov's first device 35 years ago in Berlin. By thinking past the obvious. By understanding that every bomb maker, no matter how skilled, has patterns and weaknesses. And most importantly, by trusting his training and staying calm under pressure. Chief Reeves, would you like to explain? Tommy stepped forward, and Jack saw in him the same confidence and competence that Chief Webb had seen in Jack 3 decades ago. The torch was being passed, the knowledge was surviving. The key was recognizing that Volkov wanted his device to be beautiful. He could not help showing his work, displaying his craftsmanship, and that pride created vulnerabilities. Once I understood the structure, I could take it apart, but I would not have understood it without Master Chief Dalton's training. He taught me to think like the bomb maker, to see the device not as an enemy, but as a puzzle created by another human being. And human beings make mistakes. Jack listened to Tommy teach, watched the young sailors absorb the lessons, and felt satisfaction deeper than any medal or commendation. This was legacy, not the devices he had defused, not the terrorists he had stopped, but the knowledge he had passed on. The students who would carry that knowledge forward, teach it to their own students, ensure that the skills survived long after Jack was gone. After class, Tommy walked with Jack to the parking lot. The Florida sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded Jack of that moment outside the warehouse after Volkov's arrest. Another ending that was really a beginning. You are a good teacher, Chief. Better than I was at your age. Tommy laughed. I learned from the best. And sir, I wanted to tell you something. My fiancée and I are getting married next month. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. I would be honored if you would attend. You are the closest thing I have to a father figure. Jack felt emotion tighten his throat. It would be my privilege. And Tommy, if you need someone to stand with you as a best man or father figure or whatever role needs filling, I am available. Tommy grinned. Actually, sir, I was hoping you would walk me down the aisle. Give me away, so to speak. My uncle would have done it, but he is gone. And you gave me the tools to survive in this career. Seems fitting you should be there for the next chapter of my life too." Jack gripped Tommy's shoulder. "It would be my honor." They shook hands and Tommy headed to his car. Jack stood in the parking lot, watching the sunset, thinking about all the sunsets he had missed while chasing missions and terrorists in the ghost of a Soviet bomb maker. His phone buzzed, a text from Michael with a photo attached. The photo showed a positive pregnancy test. Below it, text, "You are going to be a grandfather. Thought you should know. Hope you are ready for a new mission." Jack stared at the photo, a smile spreading across his face. A grandfather, a new generation, a chance to be present for moments he had missed with Michael. He texted back, "Best mission I have ever been assigned. Cannot wait to meet him or her. Thank you for trusting me to be part of this." The response came immediately. "You earned that trust, Dad. See you next weekend? We want to tell you all about it in person. I will be there. Wouldn't miss it for anything." Jack pocketed his phone, walked to his truck, the same truck he had driven for 15 years, now with civilian plates instead of military. He climbed in, started the engine, and headed toward home. Not the empty house where Margaret had died. He had sold that 6 months ago. But a new place, smaller, comfortable, near the water where he could fish and watch sunsets and have room for Michael and his growing family when they visited. As he drove, he thought about Volkov, now serving multiple life sentences at ADX Florence Supermax in Colorado. The old Soviet had been right about one thing. They were brothers in a way, connected by their understanding of a craft that most people would never comprehend. But Volkov had been wrong about legacy. Legacy was not about being remembered. It was about what you left behind that made the world better. For Volkov, the legacy was fear and death and devices that would be studied only to prevent them from being replicated. For Jack, the legacy was Tommy Reeves teaching the next generation of EOD specialists. It was Michael becoming a father, breaking the cycle of distance and absence that had defined their relationship. It was students across the Navy who wore the EOD badge and carried Jack's teachings into dangerous situations where that knowledge saved lives. That was legacy. Not immortality through destruction, but immortality through the positive impact you had on others. Through the knowledge passed on, the students trained, the lives touched and improved. Jack drove home through the Florida evening, and for the first time in 32 years, he was not thinking about the next mission. He was thinking about fishing with his son, about attending Tommy's wedding, about becoming a grandfather and having the chance to do better this time. The old warrior was finally at peace. The mission was complete. Not the mission to stop Volkov, though that was finished too, but the deeper mission, the one that had driven him for 3 decades without him fully understanding it. The mission to prove that his life had meaning, that his sacrifices were worthwhile, that he had left the world better than he found it. He had completed that mission. The legacy was secure, and Jack Dalton, retired Master Chief Petty Officer, was ready for whatever came next. Not with the stoic discipline of a warrior heading into battle, but with the quiet joy of a man who had finally learned that the greatest victory was not in defeating enemies, but in building relationships. Not in solving impossible problems, but in being present for the people who mattered. The sun finished setting, darkness settling over Florida. Jack turned on his headlights and drove toward home, toward the future, toward the peace he had earned after 32 years of service. The game with Volkov was over. The real life was just beginning, and Master Chief Jack Dalton was finally, truly ready to live it. From the storyteller. I spent months researching Navy EOD operations to get Master Chief Dalton's story right. The battery drain technique, real EOD tactic from the Cold War era. The 52-tooth gear signature, inspired by actual bomb maker patterns intelligence agencies still study today. What hit me hardest writing this? Jack missing his son's childhood for the mission, then realizing he'd become exactly what he feared. How many of us put duty first, only to wonder later if we got the balance right? Question for you veterans and fathers out there. If you could go back, would you do anything differently? Or was the sacrifice worth it? Drop your thoughts below. Your stories matter.